Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you for now the last part of What If Reborn in Naruto World. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name in the description below. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also, a quick update, the stories, What If Reborn in Naruto World and What If Transmigrated as Harry Potter, are going on hold soon, as we have almost caught up with the author. So once again, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what the next project should be on this channel. I'm currently deciding between these three fanfics. What if becoming a mangaka in One Piece world? What if dragon deck user in Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal. What if transmigrated as a Kanto gym leader? I will be setting up a poll for this, so please vote in the poll and let me know which two stories you'd like to see next on the channel. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 62. While the original Daiki was facing down twin weapons of massive destruction with a grin on his face, one of his clones was soaring far above the clouds. He had been created with a great purpose. Multiple even. And his first destination was a small village on the edge of the border between the Land of Fire and the Land of Loot rivers. Shouldn't take me long to get there, he thought. He'd already traversed halfway across the Land of Fire, so in a few minutes at best he'd be there. Shino wouldn't know what hit him. Literally. Once he got his hands on the body revival technique, the progress of his physical training would be amplified massively. I'll need to be careful and not overload on it like that idiot would though, he hummed. Either way, it would go a massive way to making him feel more secure for the future. He needed every advantage he could get in case Madara's resurrection actually did come to buy. Even if he killed Orochimaru and Kabuto, that wouldn't stop Madara. It didn't even matter that Obito apparently didn't know Edo Tensei. Because, while Kabuto did revive Madara in that timeline, Madara already had a plan in motion to be brought back. His whole plan revolved around it after all. Yet because Obito didn't know the Edo Tensei, it meant that his plan to be brought back didn't revolve around Edo Tensei. Unless Madara taught Edo Tensei to Black Zetsu or something. Or perhaps he was relying on the Rin'ai Tensei? But would that even work for someone who had been dead that long? Daiki thought as he crossed his arms mid-air in thought, blasting through a cloud. The real problem was, in the end he didn't know just what Madara's own plan for being brought back was. And considering Obito with Kamui literally bust out of the afterlife, it could be literally anything. For all he knew, Madara had sealed a technique in his eyes Itachi style, using his time manipulation abilities to warp time and space to respawn or some asinine bullshit like that. Madara truly was his boogeyman. Honestly, the man could casually summon meteors, each of them being around 400 kilometers in size. That was 40 times the size of the meteor that wiped out the dinosaurs on Earth. It was the size of a small country back on Earth even. And Madara could summon them almost casually. Wouldn't just one of them hitting the planet fuck it up beyond all repair? Daiki grimaced. Madara was an idiot, an overpowered idiot. If it weren't for Gaara and Old Man Rock Humper in that timeline, his whole plan for peace would have been destroyed from the get-go because he would have wiped out everyone on the bloody planet. Either way, that was the kind of monster he needed to surpass. Supposing he managed to cut off any and all plans for him to be brought back, then Daiki would have just been glad to be overprepared and not needed, then underprepared and get decimated. Underscore 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 underscore. It wasn't long later that he arrived at his destination. It was a small village, built atop a marshy grassland on the edge of a large river that ran straight into the Land of Fire, from the Land of Rivers. It had to have no more than 100 residents. Touching down on the outskirts, Daiki focused on his eyes, and a second later, a familiar shimmer of red dust emerged from his eyes, before coating his body and fading from view. His chakra being completely hidden. Now where are you? He thought to himself, eyes roaming over the village and peering through the buildings. There you are, he grinned, eyes landing on a building near the center of the small village, a small hut like home, with only 3 rooms. Inside it, he could see 2 figures. 1. A short tan girl with long reddish-brown hair, a few years older than him, sleeping in one room with her window open letting a cool breeze in, while in the main room, an older man with long white bushy hair was stirring a pot. Amaru and Shino. Perfect. Daiki moved, feet silent as he leapt into the air, landing atop one of the buildings and stealthily made his way over. A few moments later, he silently touched down within the bedroom Amaru was sleeping within. It had 2 futons within it, so he assumed both the girl and old man slept in the room. He eyed the older girl. She's really pretty, he absently noticed. Her face was gorgeous, tan, blemish-free, perfectly framed yet thick brows, dainty eyelashes. Honestly, she could pass for a noble girl. And she was pretty stacked as well, he thought, idly taking in the twin large mounds raising up and down with each breath she took. Shino is a real cunt. Daiki shook his head. His whole plan revolved around making Amaru deeply and utterly love him, almost worship him. And then utterly betraying her to leave her a mess of dark emotions that could be used as a battery for the Zero Tails. Kneeling, he pressed a palm to her forehead and with his chakra, sealed her consciousness. It would keep her asleep until the chakra powering it ran out. By which point, he'd be long gone. And with that taken care of, he silently slipped out of the room, creeping down the thin hallway and pausing outside the room Shino was sitting within. Peering through the walls, Shino none the wiser to his silent, hidden presence, Daiki made a single hand seal, genjutsu, slime-line technique, he thought, scarlet red eyes glowing. The genjutsu took effect, and a few moments later, Shino gave a drowsy yawn and slumped over asleep. With that taken care of, Daiki pulled the door open and walked over, kneeling down and just like Amaru before him, sealed the man's consciousness with a quick burst of chakra and his palm atop his forehead. And you're supposed to be a big movie villain? Daiki snorted, don't make me laugh. That was pathetic. A single low-level genjutsu he wasn't prepared for at all was enough to defeat him. Admittedly, he thought he was safe in his home, with nobody knowing of his identity whatsoever and no shinobi or kunoichi at all within the village. But still. Well, whatever, makes things easier for me. Daiki laughed lightly as he kneeled over the older man and pried open his eyelids, staring straight into his eyes. Then with the power of his Shinkigan, dove straight into his mind. There was little resistance to his eyes in the man's mind. And immediately, Daiki found himself in complete control of the man's thoughts and memories. Let's see, he thought, focusing. He tore through the man's memories, dredging up what he needed. First, the body revival technique, and any other techniques related to it. There was 4 in total revolving around the body revival technique. The body revival technique itself, the revival fist, the super revival fist and the darkness wave. They were techniques utterly reliant on outside and more potent forms of chakra than that of a standard humans. Luckily for Daiki, he had complete access to his own enhanced chakra combined with the energy of Jelal and Isabu's own chakra. Both which were far more stable than the dark chakra of the Zero Tails. Ho, he hummed in interest as he internalized the techniques. Putting aside the body revival technique, the others were quite something. The revival fist was actually quite simple. It allowed the user to release pulsing shock waves of chakra. It would go quite well actually when combined with his force palm jutsu. The darkness wave jutsu was another quite useful jutsu that allowed the user to expel waves of potent chakra outwards from their body, akin to the Hyuga's Kaiten technique, but relying on brute force potent power of enhanced chakra rather than technique. And finally was the super revival fist, which was actually quite a bit different from the normal revival fist. In practice, using it created a dense sphere of chakra, akin to a Rasengan without the spiraling effect. What caught his interest the most though, was the formation of the attack that allowed for more and more chakra to be packed into the technique, by creating rings of chakra around the sphere. With this, Daiki's eyes widened in realization. If he combined that formation with the Rasengan, wouldn't it allow for the creation of his very own spiraling fear wheel? Menma's absolutely absurd Rasengan variant? This, he had not been expecting at all. What a find! He'd already had a good idea on how to go about recreating the spiraling fear wheel himself. But now with this, he could probably get it done in record time. Soon, he thought, almost giddily. Once he did, he would be able to make the great spiraling fear wheel as well, Menma's variant of the big ball raisin gun that could wipe out up to 70 miles of land casually. And to think that was without combining it with an element like the wind-style raisin shuriken. Daiki shook those thoughts away for the moment and refocused. He could get giddy over that later. For the moment, he wasn't done. There were a few specific sealing techniques he knew Shino had knowledge on, specifically created to deal with the Zero Tails. And while he had little interest in it personally, or at least Isabu made sure he didn't, the sealing knowledge was useful for expanding his knowledge. Ho, not bad. Daiki thought as he pilfered the knowledge. Actually, on that topic. Whereas the Zero Tails. He pulled that knowledge from the recess of Shino's mind, before blinking blankly. You're kidding? It was here, in this small village. Or well, on the outskirts of it, sealed in a simple boulder completely in plain sight. Shino had brought it with him. Well, alright then. Daiki shrugged mentally. That saved him hunting it down. Now, beyond his standard knowledge as a doctor, there was just one more thing that Daiki wanted to know. Where exactly was Angkor Vantian, the flying fortress created by the Land of Sky? Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Daiki outright guffawed mentally as he pulled the information from Shino. As it turned out, the massive flying fortress was buried and sealed, made to look like a long-forgotten ruin. In the Land of Rivers. Seriously, Daiki shook his head as he retreated from the man's mind. Literally everything is there. He was joking about it being the land of loot, but at this point it really and honestly truly was. Though he supposed it made sense since Shino took up residence in a small village like this right on the border of the Land of Rivers, he'd want to be close by, right? Especially since the Zero Tails itself was required to work as the power source for the flying fortress. Good thing Daiki had the far superior Isobro to power if he ever wanted to use it. And on that note, I may steal it. Daiki decided. He could make a slight detour on his way over to Yankshira's breathing technique method from him. And on another note, Daiki placed his hand on the man's chest, and with a quick application of his chakra, applied a dead man's seal to his heart. With a specific trigger in mind. Should he try to kill Amaru, or enact any of his silly little Sky Ninja loser plans, it would activate and make his heart explode in his chest. And I'm done here. Daiki stood up, turning on his heel and leaving the failed movie villain behind. The man completely unknowing of the fact that Daiki had outright came along and stolen away his lifelong ambition, leaving him with nothing at all beyond wasted years and effort. Good game. With Shino taken care of, Daiki made his way out of the village, out into the outskirts. He wandered through a large winding stone path, surrounded by large pillar-like boulders. Honestly, it was completely out of place for a small village like this one. But it honestly came off as something more like the remnants of a larger city or town that once stood in the area. And considering how many villages and towns like that sprung up and disappeared overnight during the Warring Clans era, nobody would really question it too much. As it was, he stopped in front of a large ragged innocuous boulder midway through the path. Looking no different from any of the other boulders on the path, nobody would notice anything out of place about the boulder at all. It didn't even leak any chakra or anything. Daiki, however, was built different, and he stole an old man's most prized possession from him and life's work, and thus he knew it was exactly where the Zero Tails was sealed within. Alright then, let's make sure you won't wake up at all without my say-so. Daiki grinned, pressing his palm against the boulder. Chakra ignited on his fingertips as he branded a 4-symbol seal. With a seal powerful enough to hold back even an upper-tier bijou, the Zero Tails, a mangy little demonic leech, had no chance of busting out and getting free. Between the 4-symbol seal, and the seal specifically designed by the Land of Sky he'd stolen from Shino, he could render the Zero Tails little more than a slave to be used. Maybe I really should give it to Yakumo, he mused, thinking on Isabu's suggestion. He could easily seal it within her and use it to suck up all the negative emotions of her Edo personality demon thing. He could take her on as an apprentice and make an amazing kunoichi out of her. Even if she was a year older than him if he remembered right. But, well, he'd be Hokage, so having a disciple a year older than him wouldn't be a problem really. Would Hanabi get jealous, he wondered, cocking his head to the side idly. That would suck. He wouldn't want his cute little shoulder lowly minion apprentice to feel like he was replacing her. But then, all teams generally had a squad of 3. And he liked the idea of training up a squad of his own and making them totally superior to the Sannin. But who would be his third student? Thoughts for later. Daiki decided, placing his hand on the sealed boulder once more, and then, Suunpa, he declared, fading out of reality as he phased into Isabu's dimension, dragging the sealed Zero Tails with him. Underscore 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 underscore. Once the Zero Tails was securely stored away within Isabu's dimension, Daiki left it behind once again, and took to the air using his mysterious peacock method technique. Aura of chakra around his body in the shape of wings, he sped through the air once more, traversing past the borders of the Land of Rivers, towards his next destination. A remote ruin in the Land of Rivers, or so it seemed to be, but was in fact not. Actually, it wasn't all that far away from the borders into the Land of Wind. The forests, lakes, and rivers bled away into dusty, sandy Deadman's Land. The perfect kind of place for a ruin to be, no? Hiding completely in plain sight. With the speed he could move it, it honestly didn't take Daiki long to arrive. The clone of the original Daiki touched down outside the middle of the abandoned and dusty ruins. The only sound at all besides his own breathing being the howling eerie wind. Daiki had to hand it to Shino, he at least knew how to pick where to hide his shit. Making his way through the ruins using the knowledge he'd pilfered from Shino's head, Daiki made a beeline straight for where he knew a sealing matrix was hidden near the center of them. Once there, with a pulse of chakra he revealed the matrix itself and kneeled down, pressing his hand to it and activating the seal. Immediately, there was a reaction. The ruins around him began to shake and groan audible, the ground itself rumbling as if a massive earthquake began to erupt from beneath him into existence. The ruins around him began to shake and groan audible, the ground itself rumbling as if a massive earthquake began to erupt from beneath him into existence. The ground beneath his feet cracked, and the ruins around him shattered, splitting apart and falling away like broken panes of glass. The ruddy brown sandstone around him burst apart, and the ground itself began to rise. Gleaming gray limestone replaced the sandstone, and Daiki watched almost in awe as a massive, towering fortress elevated up out of the ground. Gargantuan in scale, it stretched on for miles, reaching the size of a small town in scope easily. With his mysterious peacock technique, Daiki took to the air and peered down with a massive grin at the giant fortress that had spawned before him. It really was such a grand sight. Though, he could do without that weird face carving spread out over the front of the massive grand fortress structure. Crossing his legs midair, Daiki cupped his chin and peered down at Anchor Vantion. I somehow doubt that is going to fit in my Dimension Force seal. But more importantly, he needed to get rid of that dumb ugly face at the front. He'd need to replace it with something far more grand and impressive. Maybe a leaf symbol? Or wait, Isabu's face instead. But wait, was that too gaudy? Would it look better with just plain buildings? Less was more, was a saying for a reason after all. Honestly, I haven't even planned out what I'm going to do with this thing, he snorted. He just saw its location in Shino's mind and decided he wanted it. Wait, could he renovate it maybe? And live in it? He'd make his home above Konoha itself. There was definitely plenty of space. And heck, he could probably design it to run on a few fragments of jello while he was at it once he went and pilfered everything in that temple as well. Even if he planned on feeding most of the jello stone to Isabu to boost his power, he could keep a few for uses like that, right? Well, decisions for later, again, he snorted, cutting off the power to his mysterious peacock method technique, and dropping to the ground. Since he couldn't store something of this size in his Dimension Force seal, quite yet. There was only one place to store it. Yo, he mentally prodded his inner turtle demon, mind giving me a hit of your chakra? It'll make it easier to move this thing. Isabu jolted mentally at the mental poke from the clone and turned his attention to said clone. Sure, I suppose I wait. What the absolute hell have you been doing? Isabu outright sputtered in shock. What the hell? I don't pay attention to one of you clones for a literal half an hour and you do this? Isabu gaped. Huh, neat. It was so rare he got to see a shocked Isabu score for one daiki. You know what, I'm not even gonna bother, here take the chakra. Isabu huffed, and a second later a familiar boiling red chakra shimmered into existence around his form, 3 bubbling huge shrimp-like chakra tails wagging behind him. Daiki laughed, placing his hand against the massive flying fortress that was Anchor Vantian, Suwunpa. He activated the space-time ninjutsu, overloading it with a massive amount of his and Isabu's chakra. And a second later, he phased out of the dimension, dragging the colossal town-sized fortress alongside him into Isabu's personal dimension. Underscore 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 underscore. You know, I'm glad I accepted this mission, so glad. The clone of Daiki couldn't wipe the massive shit-eating grin off of his face if he tried as he once more took to the air, and made his way into the land of wind. He had gotten his hands on a shit ton of chakra metal, and a seal to make more. Figured out the basis for creating Samahata, secured an alliance with the mist, rizzed up the Mizukage, got his hands on a bunch of powerful techniques, stole a demon, stole a giant sky fortress. I bet you are. That's not even all of it either, Isabu snorted. People dedicated their entire lives to getting even one of the things you've pilfered in the last few days. Meanwhile, a dozen absurd abilities, items or a demon later, and you're on your way to go grab up another technique near on the level of the 8 gates and find the corpse of a Kage. Some guys were just built different than the rest. Sure, let's go with that. Isabu rolled his eyes. Speaking of. Daiki paused midair, bringing his hands into a familiar hand seal, multi-shadow clone jutsu, he declared. There was a massive puff of smoke around him, blown away by the wind, to reveal 100 clones. Alright lads, you know what to do. He pointed out into the vast distance of desert below, the large winding sandy lands of the lands of wind. Find me the corpse of a clown Kage. Moments later, the night sky was lit up with 100 glowing absurdly handsome daikis as they tore through the skyclad in the mysterious peacock technique. He'd leave finding Raza's corpse to them, while he went on to Shira's village. Underscore 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 underscore. It didn't take him long at all to find Shira's village, nor Shira himself for that matter. It was a tiny little village, even smaller than the one he found Shino in. And, even though it was the dead of night, Shura himself stood out. Specifically because the older teenager wasn't in the vicinity of the village, but rather a small ways away from the village, training in the middle of a large rocky plateau. Daiki peered down at the older teen as he worked through one-handed push-ups, his tunic soaked with sweat, a great big puddle of it having dripped down from his face to the ground below him. 23-182. Shira grit out. Daiki respected the hustle. Shira was a real one who understood, like Lee and Guy, that the one true holy grind was the true path to strength. It was too bad he had to steal the technique of such a great guy. But needs must, and it would go to a good cause, helping him be strong enough to overcome Madara should the worst come to pass. Daiki blinked suddenly as memories pinged through his mind. The clones he'd made had dispelled, they had found Raza's corpse rather easily. He snorted, smirking as the image of Raza's corpse, being put into a silly position with both hands forced into peace signs appeared in his head. His clones, it seemed, weren't happy with just taking a chunk of his flesh and DNA, but felt the need to leave his corpse in a humiliating position. Good clones. He would have done it too. Alright then, I suppose it's best to get a move on. Daiki thought, peering down at Shira. Like with Shino before him, Daiki made a single hand sign, his scarlet eyes glowing red as he reached out with his chakra, genjutsu, sly mind technique. He cast the genjutsu, and like with Shino as well, he didn't alter his perception or anything like that. Instead, he simply altered how he felt, to make the older teenager feel tired, drowsy. With him already being so exhausted from training so extensively, it wasn't long before he yawned, lowering himself from his one-handed push-ups into a sitting position, eyes wavering, going half-lidded. And then he fell asleep. Daiki dropped out of the air a second later, landing in front of him. "Sorry about this, mate, but I need that technique," he apologized, even as he pried the older teenager's eyes open and dove into his mind with the Shinkigan. It was child's play from there, to drag out the information of his technique, the Seven Heavens breathing method. And one singular technique of Shira's as well. He called it the Silent Fist. A chakra cloak-style technique, used by covering the entire body in chakra and suppressing all sound made within that chakra. It would pair incredibly well with his chakra fabrication technique. Once he was done, Daiki cast one last look at the sleeping Shira, a little bit regretful, before making a single hand seal and disappearing in a puff of smoke as he dispelled himself, transferring all his memories and everything he'd learned back to the original Daiki. Chapter 63. While his clone was making out like a bandit, the original Daiki found himself sitting cross-legged in a large hotel room, not far from the bar he found Tsunade in to start with. Said alcoholic sitting opposite him, only a small table between them. A tiny little towel was all she had on currently, doing little to cover her modesty. She was displaying an obscene amount of cleavage, her enormous tits impossible to hide. And only came down a bit over her thighs, leaving a massive amount of thick, juicy thigh on display. All that remained of her outfit before the fight was the glinting green crystal of the Shodame Hokage's necklace, dangling almost tauntingly. "I can't believe you too." Shizen huffed from beside Tsunade, while Anko sat at Daiki's side. "Especially you, Tsunade-sama, you should know better." "Oh, put a sock in it, Shizun." Tsunade rolled her eyes and shrugged her shoulders, making her huge tits ripple and jiggle deliciously. "No, how can you be so unrepentant?" Shizen huffed, squeezing Taunton to her chest indignantly. "You can't just go around destroying everything over an argument. You created a literal massive lake just outside of town with your childish fight, over 100 feet deep. If you two fought in the middle of town, you would have totaled it." Anko leaned casually against Daiki's shoulder, barking a laugh, a smirk playing on her lips as she observed the tense atmosphere. "Come on, Shizun. This was kind of impressive, you have to admit." They were only fighting for a few minutes and they basically started reshaping the landscape. "Impressive? It's a disaster," Shizun insisted. Tsunade rolled her eyes at her apprentice, before meeting Daiki's eyes and raising a brow at him. He shrugged. He was in a much better mood now after blowing some steam. And it seemed Tsunade was too. A tentative draw had been declared. Daiki was fine with it. He'd learned quick, even out of shape as she was, the kind of firepower required to put Tsunade down would level the town and area around them. It was good experience though, he thought. His first taste of real combat against an S-class ninja. Orochimaru technically didn't count since he'd just taken the man by surprise and started blasting. Alright, Tsunade waved Shizen off, before flicking her fingers at her and then Anko, "Both of you, go take a walk, eh? Me and this brat have some things to talk about." "Tsunade-sama, I don't think that's a good idea. Leaving both of you alone after what you just got up to," Shizun protested. And she wasn't wrong too. Common sense would dictate not to leave the two who just had a violent battle against each other, that would have turned lesser shinobi into pulped red mist, alone with each other. Too bad, common sense and S-class monsters did not go hand in hand. "It's fine," Daiki waved her protests off and nodded at Anko. "We aren't going to fight again." Anko shrugged, standing. "You're the boss for this mission," she replied easily. "Come on, Shizun, I need a drink anyway after the nonsense I've been put through with this brat." Shizun protested again and hesitated to leave, but in the end, she bowed to Tsunade's demands when her master told her to buzz off again for a while. "So?" Daiki broke the silence between them when the door slid shut. "That was fun." "Yeah, I'll bet it was for you," Tsunade snorted. "You got a full free view at what Jiraiya's been trying to get his eyes on for decades." She crossed her arms intentionally under her massive tits, making them almost swell up out of the tiny towel she was wearing. "Like I told that pervy toad himself," Daiki shrugged with a smirk, "I'm just built different compared to him. And don't get my jollies letting women beat on me." "Maybe if he had the balls to pick a proper fight with you instead of letting you punt him around like a masochist, he'd have got a proper look at those massive fun bags of yours by now." "You're something else alright," Tsunade snorted, smirking. A kid your age would usually be a blushing stammering mess after getting a view as spectacular as my tits. Daiki shrugged. I'm not like most guys my age, though the view was definitely killer. His eyes strayed to her massive canyon of juicy creamy cleavage. God damn. That's for sure. I guess the old man actually did know what he was doing for once, Tsunade snorted, strength-wise and conviction at least. You have a real attitude problem and are way too young to be Hokage. I don't actually disagree, Daiki shrugged again and replied truthfully, but I'm the best the old man has to pick from. Kakashi doesn't have the strength. Jiraiya won't take the hat. That left only old man Danzo with you out of the village. At the mention of Danzo, Tsunade's nose wrinkled. Alright, I can see why you're Sarutobi-sensei's first choice then. An arrogant brat is a big step up from Danzo. Then again, a turd on the side of the road baking under the sun is a big step up from him as well. He has his uses, Daiki shrugged, and if he tries to give me any of the same crap he gives the old man, I'll just kill him, he said honestly. Danzo would either play ball Daiki's way, or he was getting kicked off the team. And by that, he meant decapitated, after he ripped all those Sharingan eyes he stole off of him. He wouldn't mind stocking up on some Izanagi bullshit himself, to be honest. What a ruthless kid. You wouldn't think you came from a somewhat peaceful time like the rest of the brats your age. Tsunade barked a laugh and sounded very approving, making her huge tits jiggle. Still, I approve. Sarutobi-sensei should have gotten rid of that fossil years ago. Indeed he should have. But he wasn't the old man third, he knew everything about Danzo and what he was up to. And his views aligned more with Danzo than the Sandames did. He had good odds on making use of him. And well, if he wasn't amendable? The Hokage's word was law. And off with his head. He should have, yeah, Daiki agreed, before leaning on the table. So, putting that aside now, let's get down to business, yeah? Fine with me, Tsunade nodded, smirking at him and leaning forward herself, uncaring as her towel dipped lower, giving him a peek at juicy pink nipples, the Hokage necklace dangling distractingly. You weren't bullshitting about being able to restore my youth, were you? Nope, Daiki confirmed, smirking back. I was being totally truthful. It takes a shit ton of chakra, mind you. Chakra I have to stockpile like you do with that seal on your forehead. Well, he had enough easily to re-roll Tsunade 30 years without problem. He'd had nearly 3 weeks now since he used up his stocked chakra on Shursue's corpse to build his stockpile up again. He was almost back to half the amount he'd had then, and Isabu had confirmed he'd used up 1,000 years worth of life force to regenerate Shursue's corpse and eyes. Tsunade's smirk widened, and he saw excitement and glee sparkle in her deep hazel eyes. Alright, in that case kid, since our little fight ended in a draw, I think it's only fair we both get the bed prizes, yeah, she said, reaching up and twirling the crystal necklace dangling from her neck around one finger. This necklace is cursed, everyone but me who's worn it has died in battle, but I don't think you'll care about that after the shit you said earlier. And it'll be useful to you, since this is my grandfather's necklace. It'll add a lot of legitimacy to you becoming Hokage. Daiki had to resist the urge to burst out laughing. She wasn't wrong, and it was worth a shit ton as she had said before. But it was much more of a sweet deal for her considering she absolutely hated the necklace. Yeah, I don't care about curses at all. I'm too awesome for any loser curse to do me in. Daiki shrugged, though. It being the Shodames doesn't really interest me much, not a big fan of him personally. No offense, but I think he was an absolute moron. I'm a much bigger fan of your uncle, the Nidame. Tsunade snorted. Somehow, with the blunt uncaring way you talked about my past earlier, that doesn't surprise me, brat, she said, before pulling the necklace over her head and holding it out towards him. So, deal? Daiki eyed it for a moment. If you agree to come back to the village, yes, he replied, I'll even sweeten the deal. If you do come back, I'll top you up every few years, extend your lifespan a bit more and let you stay young. Tsunade blinked. You know, I was actually planning on coming back anyway, she said, and grinned smugly, but don't mind if I do. No take-backs. Daiki rolled his eyes. Looks like I'm the latest scam victim of the legendary sucker, he snorted, reaching over and taking the necklace from her grasp and putting it around his own neck. But honestly, it was a small price to pay. Bringing her back to the village would be a massive boon, well worth the price. Plus, she was Tenten's idol, which would get him a lot of bonus points with her, and the best person to teach Sakura. Tsunade grinned smugly. Yeah, you are. She flashed him a victory peace sign. So anyway, How does this youth restoration shit work? Daiki stood up, stretching out his arms. Stand up and lose the towel, he ordered. Needs a lot of bare skin and surface level for my technique to seep through for it to work best, he casually bullshitted. Is that right? Tsunade raised a brow, giving him a suspicious look. But that didn't stop her from standing up, pulling her towel apart and letting it pool around her ankles, showing off her puffy, surprisingly tight-looking snatch and enormous yet somehow perky tits, the only sag at all in them being from their sheer size. Nope, actually, Daiki smirked again, casually reaching over and palming one of her enormous tits with one hand, while making a hand seal with the other. I just wanted to see your amazing tits. Holy shit, it was so big it spilled and overflowed out of his palm, and was so heavy, yet so soft. She beat out even May's tits. Unreal. Tsunade raised a brow at him, groping her, but out of all the reactions he expected, her exploding into guffawing laughter wasn't one of them. Alright, well played, brat, she nodded, and didn't bother brushing his hand off. I know, right? He laughed back, even as he focused on his eyes, Tsunade's second brow rising to join the first as his Shinkigan began to glow a deep scarlet and he drew upon the massive amount of chakra stored within his heavenly star seal. Tsunade whistled. Damn, you weren't kidding about this needing a massive ton of chakra. Yeah, he was so lucky to have Isabu, or he wouldn't be able to build up the same amount of chakra even after a year as he was right now. Even now, with his chakra in the Kage range, albeit low class, Isabu still had a good 60 times the amount of chakra Daiki did. Silvery white chakra shimmered into existence around his body, before condensing around his arm that was groping Tsunade's huge, soft breast, and slinking through his grip, into her body. Tsunade gasped, spine arching and eyes widening, a mule leaving her throat as a shimmering aura of flaming silver white chakra enveloped her body whole. He felt it before he saw it, to be honest. Chakra was made up of two parts. The physical and the spiritual. And it could be increased through training both ways. And it inspired the philosophy of what a chunin should be. Strong not only in body, but mind. And the reverse, strong, not only in mind, but body. It was why he thought Shikamaru in the original timeline was completely undeserving of being a chunin. Putting aside the fact that Daiki found his mental side pathetic as well, he lacked the physical ability required. As it was, he felt Tsunade's chakra spike. As her physical peak was restored, so too did her chakra grow. Especially since his technique did not just return the age, but the pure potent life force within it enhanced the body. Tsunade's technique faded from around her body. She didn't change much at all, the only difference was crow's feet appearing around her eyes. She did not look like a woman in her 50s at all beneath her transformation. Such was the vitality of a member of both the Senju and Uzumaki clans. But even those crow's feet disappeared quickly. Her skin became glossier, shinier, younger. Her golden blonde hair, glowing with a gleaming luster. Her spine straightening out a bit, her thighs and hips becoming fuller, her already massive tits becoming slightly bigger. When he finally ended the technique, Tsunade was panting deeply. Holy, she gasped out, looking up at him through her bangs. That was incredible. I get that reaction a lot from women. Daiki smirked smugly, and squeezed. And then he blinked as Tsunade gasped, mulling from him squeezing her breast, and he actually let go on reflex, not expecting that to happen. Even my sensitivity is back. She blinked rapidly. Wow. She was speechless. I feel amazing. Tsunade huffed out as she stood up fully, massive tits bouncing. Just wow. I can't remember if I've ever felt this good. I'd hope so. Daiki rolled his eyes after a moment of getting over his own shock at her reaction. I just rolled your clock back by 30 years, physically you're 21 again. 21. She bit her lip, before pumping her fist into the air, the action making her huge tits jiggle obscenely and distractingly. Amazing, I can't believe it, 21 again. You're really something fucking else, brat. She bounced around giddily, before abruptly grabbing him by the hair and dragging him forward and smashing her lips against his roughly. This, he did not expect. Daiki's eyes widened and he groaned into the kiss. Daiki's mind blanked for a moment as Tsunade's tongue forced his lips apart, surprising hunger. Her kiss was forceful and intense, matching her usual boldness, and he instinctively brought his hands to her hips, feeling the warmth of her newly revitalized skin. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were still half-lidded with smug satisfaction. Hell no. Daiki's hands went from her hips to her fat juicy ass, cupping her cheeks roughly, sinking his hands into them, and this time he kissed her, making her eyes widen, before she smirked and reached up, ripping his shirt off. Her nails raked over chest roughly, as his tongue dueled with hers. He used his grip on her juicy-ass cheeks and lifted her into the air, Tsunade's naked thick thighs and long-toned legs wrapping around his waist on instinct. Fuck! Daiki gasped as he pulled back, wide-eyed. Shit, is this really fucking happening? He did not expect this at all. Tsunade grabbed his black spiky hair and pulled his face into her massive canyon of cleavage, forcing him to motorboat her huge tits. Yeah, I feel fucking real good right now, brat, and I want to celebrate, she barked to laugh. Besides, do you know how long it's been since I got some? Hopefully your cocky attitudes lives up to the hype even down below. She mewed suddenly, eyes widening as Daiki spanked her. But don't you worry about that, I've had no complaints, he boasted. In fact, usually it's more along the lines of oh my god it's so big, he sniggered. I'll be the judge of that brat. Tsunade snorted, kissing him roughly again, before breaking out of his hold and landing on her feet. She crouched down, one hand grabbing the top of his blue pants, before yanking them down, breaking his belt as if it were made of cotton candy, his pants dropping to his ankles alongside his boxers. Lemon scene happened. Ha! Well, okay then. It looked like his clone had went above and beyond. A massive smirk spread across his face, one of pure victory. Tonight was a good night. Underscore 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 underscore. Down in the bar below the rooms, Anko, sitting beside Shizen at the bar, had just gotten a bottle of sake and filled a saucer. Sure you don't want to join me for a drink, she asked. No. I try to abstain, it's kind of a requirement when dealing with Tsunade-sama. Shizen sighed, slumped over the bar. Anko snorted, and was about to point out that she was such a stick in the mud, when she heard it. Screaming. Familiar screams. From a woman that sounded an awful lot like Tsunade. Tsunade-sama? Shizen's head jerked up, staring at the ceiling, hot red blush spreading her cheeks. Anko blinked slowly. This fucking kid, she gaped, how the hell did he do it? She reached for her sake bottle, only to blink as she found it gone. She turned, and found Shizen, bottle to her lips and downing it in great big gulps. Well, alright line. Hey bartender, another sake over here. Anko called over. She was so not dealing with Daiki being up above fucking the shit out of Tsunade apparently, while sober. Chapter 64. The next morning, there was a massive shit-eating grin on Daiki's face as he soared above the clouds. Anko, being carried by him however, was just staring at him in absolute disbelief. How do you function? She asked, like seriously, the old man has been trying to get her to return to the village for over a decade now, and you managed to get her to agree in the span of a few hours by being an obnoxious little shit, and somehow getting into bed with her as well. That makes no sense. He resisted the urge to laugh. He understood her disbelief and utter confusion over everything that went down with Tsunade. To be perfectly honest, he actually had little idea how he pulled that off as well. Well, giving her youth back was obviously a big part of it. But beyond that, he had no idea how he managed to make her get over her fear of blood. Like, yeah, Naruto managed to do the same in the span of a few minutes of showing up to the fight with Orochimaru and Kabuto. But still, it made him think it wasn't really a trauma over blood, but rather something to do with being stuck in the past until she got clobbered over the head and knocked some sense into. That was the only thing that made sense. To be honest, I've no idea how I pulled that off as well. I was flying by the seat of my pants, he admitted with a shrug. Best I can guess? The old man was too soft with her. The nice gentle approach rarely works for people caught up in a pity party, especially arrogant prideful woe-is-me types. But I ain't the old man, I have no reason to give her all the allowances he did, yet like the old man I'm not some randomer she could just throw her fist at and squash. Anko hummed, I suppose that makes some sense, I suppose. She trailed off before scoffing, and listen to you calling somebody else arrogant and prideful, pot calling the kettle black much? I never said I wasn't. Daiki shrugged. As it was, they'd split from Tsunade and Shizen when morning came. They had a few things to take care of before they could return to the village. And that would work out best, because he didn't want it known she would be in the village come the end of the Chunin exams, and had even asked her to keep it on the down low herself. Orochimaru would probably get spooked mightily if he knew Tsunade had returned to the village as well. As it was, he'd been avoiding bringing it up with the old man and getting the village prepared in advance, because he knew Orochimaru would hear of it somehow. He wasn't sure how deep his fingers were in Konoha, beyond knowing there was quite a few traders beyond just Kabuto, and he only knew of a few of them. If he miscalculated and one of them learned of plans to counter Orochimaru and reported it back to him, there was no telling what nonsense he would pull in response. Like what if he pulled a Kabuto and made an army of Edo Tensei in advance? While he hadn't perfected the technique like Kabuto, and thus were way weaker when revived by him currently, it would still be game over for Konoha and everyone really. No, he wanted to deal with both Orochimaru and Kabuto in one fell swoop during the invasion and take them out. It would put the people of the Leaf at risk, but less than the normal timeline because he was here. And not only did he know of Orochimaru's plans, but would have hundreds of clones ready and waiting to burst out of Isabu's dimension the second shit went down and dogpile every sand or sound ninja in sight. Gaara was really the only outlier, but he could be dealt with easily enough as he was right now. He was nothing without Shikaku at the moment. Once he dealt with Orochimaru and Kabuto, there was only one threat left he needed to deal with to stop Madara being brought back as an Edo Tensei, and that was Black Zetsu, because he was betting that clown knew it. Orochimaru, Kabuto, Black Zetsu, and Obito. They were the ones that needed to die to make sure Madara couldn't be revived at all. You realize the old man probably already knows about your little spat with Tsunade yet? Anko broke him from his thoughts. We have agents all across Fire Country and beyond. No way we didn't have some in town that saw that fight and didn't send a messenger hawk back to the old man. No doubt, he laughed lightly. After all, Tsunade and Shizen weren't the only chakra signatures he'd seen within the town, just the biggest. He'd picked out what seemed to be a few dozen Chunin tier chakra capacities spread throughout the town. Heh, he's gonna be pissed at you. Anko laughed at him. I'll just tell him you dared me to try and bed her. Daiki shot back, cutting off her laughter. As if he'd believe that. Anko growled, laughter cutting off. He knows what you're all about, brat. We'll see. Daiki smugged at her. Still, that did remind him of another issue, of another old man that needed to be dealt with. Danzo. That old fool seemed to have taken a liking to his attitude before, but he couldn't be entirely sure he'd back him. In that case, there was only one thing to do. Pay him a visit when he got back. Though not before he had made Shursue's Sharingan his. Koto Amatsukami was too much of a threat to deal with, without a way to counter it. Even if the old pretend cripple couldn't use the truly most potent version since Itachi had the proper eye for it. And who knows, if things went well, he could perhaps even get his hands on some of Hashirama Senju's cells from the old warmonger. Not long later, he touched down in a secluded forest, lowering Anko down and cutting off his mysterious peacock method jutsu. Wait, why are we stopping here? Anko gave him a confused look. We're close, yeah, but this ain't waterfall. I know, there's just something I want to check right now. Daiki waved her off. He reached for his prize from the night before, the green crystal necklace dangling from his neck, and held it up. This thing has a special ability that makes Bijou chakra easier to control when worn. The Shodan used it to help him suppress the Bijou's chakra easier. Anko raised a brow. Didn't you say you were a perfect Jinchuriki before? And that you had total control, she asked. I have total control of how I use the power, but it's still a massive amount of chakra, over 50 times the amount of my own and way more potent. Daiki waved her off, and it isn't like I even have perfect control over my own chakra. I mean, who does? Anko shrugged. Me, in the future. Daiki decided internally, but outwardly he just shrugged back, exactly. Which is why this necklace will be a big help. Chakra control after all didn't just help with the formation of jutsu and such and saving chakra. But, it made it even easier to form jutsu and other techniques. And thus, faster. And with the help of it, he may even be capable of some crazy feats. Like combining the Raisin Shuriken with the Bijudama. One of the most potent jutsu Naruto ever created in the original timeline. In fact, 9 Bijudama infused with the various elements of the Biju became known as the most marvelous ninjutsu of all time in that timeline. Naruto had needed to master senjutsu to create that technique, but with the necklace and his own chakra enhancements, he might not need it. And if he could accomplish that? What if when he managed to recreate the spiraling fear wheel? What if he managed to add an element to it as well? What if he managed to combine that variation with a Bijudama? Quite frankly, it's an absurd thought, Isabu chimed in, going by how much the Raisin Shuriken increases in potency from the normal Rasengan. Applying that same thing to the spiraling fear wheel and then combining that with a Bijudama? It could possibly destroy the entire planet. Yeah, that sounded about right. It was a delicious thought, to be honest. It would probably end up becoming a completely last resort jutsu that could only be used when absolutely everything was fucked. Or when in a completely different dimension. But it was still something incredible to have on hand to use as a last-ditch kind of thing. But anyway, beyond even that, just getting to the point where his control was good enough to instantly form and fire off a standard Bijudama would be insane in of itself. And now on that topic. Status, he thought, and a second later a familiar black screen with crimson-red writing appeared in his vision. Name, Daiki Uriai. Chakra capacity, 215, 589/215, 589, Lotir Kage. Strength, 206/. Endurance, 297/. Durability, 208/. Agility, 206/. Taijutsu, 268/500. Ninjutsu, 402/500. Genjutsu, 110/500. Bokijutsu, 188/500. Chakra control, 368/500. Chakra affinities. Lightning, expert the heavens spark. Water, expert the sea parts before you. Wind. Master the gale bows. Earth, adept the earth shakes. Fire, master the flames of creation, blaze. Fuinjutsu, advance the breath hitches. Ho, he thought, eyes widening ever so slightly as he took in his statistics. His clones had really went all in on the fire-style element training, huh? Like, he knew that already, but he hadn't expected the exercises they'd completed that the old man had given him would bring him to the mastery level of it so quickly. Not only that, but in the process he'd broken into the 400 mark in ninjutsu, his highest by far at this point, with chakra control coming in at a slightly distant second. And to think that was only 2 elements at the mastery level. What about when the 2 expert tier lightning and water element hit mastery? What about when the adept level earth? He might actually break over 450. Which reminded him, he really needed to find out about another advanced lightning-style training method. He knew of up to mastery with earth and water, but he didn't know what to do going forward with lightning. Which was kind of hilarious considering it was his actual base affinity. He had managed to pry out the specifics from Tsunade about her body pathway derangement lightning jutsu, but that wasn't going to do it. Well, whatever, he shrugged mentally. He'd ask the old man or something when he got back. Or, bribe Kakashi into it with offering to take care of the Orochimaru soul shard in Sasuke's curse mark. Granted he was going to do that anyway, but Kakashi didn't need to know that. Now let's try this out. Daiki smirked, dismissing his status screen for the moment, and clenching his fists as he pulled upon Isabu's chakra. Almost instantly, a familiar crimson bubbling red cloak of chakra sizzled into existence around him, 3 massive shrimp-like energy tails fluttering languidly behind him. You know, I don't think I'll ever get used to how you can call up such absurdly potent chakra right in front of me, yet I'm not able to sense it at all, while staring straight at it. Anko snorted, as she hopped up onto a tree above and sat on one of the overreaching branches. He just smirked as he moved the chakra cloak to his will, the 3 massive shrimp-like tails extending and shrinking. Snapping out like whips with a thought, darting through the air like striking serpents. It was a bit hard to notice since he already had such good control of the chakra cloak like this. But it's a little smoother, he noticed. A little bit stronger, a little bit more potent, a little bit faster. Overall, just a little bit better. Awesome. Alright, now let's try a jutsu. He mused aloud, holding his palm out and collecting the chakra of the cloak around him, condensing it into a familiar spiraling sphere of deep green. The Rasengan formed in the blink of an eye. Twice as fast as he could form one usually. Oh yeah, this is good, he grinned widely. Is that the Yandame's fucking Rasengan? Anko sputtered from above him, eyes flying wide open. Oh right, he hadn't shown anybody he could do this yet. Oops. Daiki froze for a split second, realizing he might have let the cat out of the bag a bit too casually. He turned his head toward Anko, who was staring at the glowing green sphere in his hand like it was about to explode, and not in the fun way. Yeah, he admitted sheepishly, rubbing the back of his head with his free hand. The Rasengan hovered steadily above his palm, a testament to his control. Forgot to mention figured this out a while ago. Anko leapt down from the tree, landing in front of him with a thud. Her hands were on her hips, her expression a mix of disbelief and irritation. A while ago? And you're just now showing it off? Kid, that's the freaking Yandame's Rasengan. How? Why even? To be fair, Daiki said, still grinning, I haven't had much reason to use it yet. Besides, it's not like I went around bragging about it or anything. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. It wasn't all that hard to figure out. Not a big. Anko cut herself off with a groan, pinching the bridge of her nose. Let me get this straight. You've been running around with a perfected version of the fourth Hokage's signature technique, and you didn't think anyone might want to know about that? How did you even do it? He resisted the urge to point out that it wasn't perfected, since the Rasengan was never a complete technique to begin with, but refrained for the moment. Daiki shrugged. I figured it'd come up eventually. Like now, for example, but it wasn't really a priority, he said casually. The best way to go about this was to treat it as if it wasn't a big thing, and like I said, it wasn't that hard. I saw some comments about it in a few books and heard a few people talking about it and figured it would be awesome to try and recreate it. I didn't think it would be so easy. Anko stared at him for a moment, then sighed and ran a hand through her hair. You're gonna give me a heart attack one of these days, you know that? Well, in for a penny, in for a pound, right? Then I should probably bring up I can do this as well, right? He smirked and made a few rapid hand seals, before holding his hand up. Crackling lightning burst into existence around his arm, shrieking through the forest around them like the chirping of 1,000 angry birds. Anko stared at his arm blankly. Of course you can do Kakashi's Chidori as well, why am I not surprised? She rolled her eyes. I don't suppose he taught you that? You kidding? Daiki snorted. He barely teaches his own team, never mind me. I reverse engineered it because dabbing on Kakashi makes me sleep like a baby at night. When he became Hokage, he was going to make it a national holiday. Dab on Kakashi Day. A day where everyone in the entire Leaf Village, nay, the entire Land of Fire would come together to make fun of Kakashi. Not long later, he left the clearing behind. This time, alone. He left a clone with Anko, for the simple matter that he wasn't sure that Waterfall would let Anko in with him. Surprisingly, she didn't make any fuss. It was as if she had long since given up trying to apply normal standards to him. As soon as he was in the air, he sent a message with the wave transmission technique to let Fu know he was on his way and would be there within a few minutes. And it wasn't long before the massive mountain the hidden Waterfall village was located within came into sight. Just as marvelously huge as he remembered. A high-pitched and excited squeal made him look up, and his eyes zoomed in on a blur of tan and mint chocolate zipping down from the cloud line. His eyes widened. Fu, was all he managed to say before she reached him and slammed into him like a falling meteor in a tangle of limbs. Thin svelte brown arms wrapped around his shoulders. Daiki, you're finally back. Fu beamed excitedly as they tumbled out of the air, nuzzling her hair against his cheek happily like an overly excited puppy as they free fell. And you can fly now like me too. Yes, he could. Speaking of. He flared the chakra around him, riding them midair. Yup, I can. I'm sure I already told you that before though. They talked pretty much every day. Fu was a heavy motor mouth that told him all about her day, every day, chattering on and on. It was quite distracting actually at times. Did you? Fu cocked her head to the side, wrapping her legs around his waist and tightening her arms around his shoulders to keep herself propped up. Probably, I guess? I forgot? Tee-hee, she stuck her tongue out cheekily. Classy, he snorted, eyes narrowing slightly on her as he looked over her chakra signature. You're the real one, huh, not a clone? While her chakra capacity had definitely grown since he last seen her, she definitely hadn't grown to the point where she'd have more chakra than he last saw her with in a shadow clone. Fu nodded. I told Shibuki you were coming and he said I could fly out and meet you. He didn't bother pointing out he was only a few minutes away at most and she didn't need to. This worked out a little better for him anyway. He's sure grown a little more lenient, huh? He raised a brow and snorted. I suppose his balls that regrew a little bit the last time I was here, grew a little bit more. Well and he just gave in after I annoyed him too much. Fu smirked. Yeah, that fit too. He casually lowered them down from the sky. It's good to see you again, well in person at least, he said as they touched down. Fu didn't bother to unwrap herself from him at all. And he wasn't exactly in any hurry for her to anyway. Yeah, really, she grinned widely. I missed you, Daiki, even if we did talk every day. I missed you too, Daiki replied. I'll figure out a way to see you more often after the Chunin exams. Didn't you say you might end up being the Hokage soon though? The mint-haired girl replied, cocking her head. Like I see how busy Shibuki is constantly and he's only the leader of Waterfall, which is tiny compared to Konoha, right? You'll be swamped constantly and have zero free time. Hell no. Daiki refuted instantly and resolutely, offended by the very thought. I wouldn't have accepted the offer if I didn't have a way around that. I'll just get some useful secretaries to help me and have clones do all my work. Unless there's something important that requires me to be there, I'm spending as little time in that damn office as possible. Really, she perked up, before laughing happily, legs kicking out behind his back. I knew it. I kept telling Shibuki to do that but he wouldn't do it, the fuddy-duddy. Always going on about responsibilities and blah blah. I almost thought you'd have to do the same, but I'm glad to see Daiki as expected. I am Daiki indeed, he smirked, puffing his chest out. Anyway, I actually have something I want to show you. I've been holding off telling you all about it because I wanted to show you in person. She cocked her head to the side. Oh, she asked interested, grinning back, is it your dick? No, it's not my dick, he sputtered. Why did you even think of that? I mean, you showed it off a ton to me last time you were here, and you kept telling me about all these girls and you were always excited about that, she pointed out with flawless logic. For one, my clothes got destroyed last time I was here and I didn't mean to do that, and secondly you kept pestering me about what I was up to 24/7 so I just told you what I was up to like you asked, he refuted, so no, it's not my dick. Ah, she pouted, I even bought a camera in advance since I didn't have one last time to take that picture. This girl. Never change Fu, he shook his head. Don't plan to, she just grinned wider. He laughed, so yeah, no, it's not my dick, it's this, he said, and reached deep inside while he stared into her sparkling orange eyes. And a split moment later, a familiar sizzling red chakra cloak with 3 wiggling shrimp-like tails shimmered into existence around his form, enveloping both him and the girl in his arms. Her eyes abruptly widened in shock, awe, disbelief, confusion, and a whole slew of emotions that ran through her features so quickly even he had trouble deciphering them all. Daiki, you're a Jinchuriki as well, her jaw dropped. Yup, he smirked widely, moving his 3 massive shrimp-like energy tails up above their heads and wiggling them. I won't go a lot into the specifics. I just came across some assholes who had planned to use the sandbite to attack Konoha, and ended up sealing him inside myself to stop them. We're pretty good friends now actually, which is why I can use his chakra so easily. Fu stared at him for a few seconds blankly, before erupting into giggles. Daiki, you're so crazy, she burst out. I can't believe you went ahead and made yourself a Jinchuriki. He shrugged with a snort. Why not? I mean, I know you had a rough time of it, and most do, but well, you know I don't really give a shit about what people think, right? He pointed out, and Jinchuriki are just flat out superior to normal ninja. Jinchuriki are the best. She raised a minty green brow. We're the best? Yup, he smirked, we're the goddamn best. You're awesome, Fu, and so am I. The Sanbai is awesome, and so is the Nanabai. Say it with me, Jinchuriki are the best. Jinchuriki are the best, she giggled and repeated. Damn right, he took one hand off of her waist and pumped it in the air. If anyone ever says anything to you about being a Jinchuriki, insulting you with demon nonsense that or hell spawnness, just call them a jealous scrub and tell them to shut the fuck up, 'cause you're a superior awesome Jinchuriki. Fu's giggles turned into outright hilarity and laughter. You're so insane, Daiki, I love it. It took almost a minute for her to calm down, but yeah, you've got nothing to ever be ashamed about being a Jinchuriki, Fu, he assured her just in case. She smiled back. Speaking of though, Daiki continued on, letting the chakra cloak fall apart and sizzle away into nothingness, my bijou actually wants to speak to yours, if you're up for it. Orange eyes blinked back at him. Sure? But, how would that even work, she asked. Oh, you're gonna love it, since if the Nanabai is up for it, we'll be able to meet up technically in person whenever we want, Daiki said and reached up with his free hand to pry one of her arms from around his neck and interlock her fingers with hers, holding her hand. He drew upon Isabu's chakra and let it flow into her from their interlocked fingers. Is this enough? He asked internally. This will do, yes, give me 1 second. Isabu replied. And just a split moment later, his vision wavered, darkness washing over him, before being enveloped in a warm orange light. Chapter 65. When his vision returned, Daiki found himself sitting atop Isabu's massive head and beheld an expansive, warm orange world. The land they were open was a never-ending expanse of orange, while above them a comforting blackness cast a dusk that took any brightness that would hurt the eyes, giving birth to a simple, empty, yet warm and comfortable world. Brother, it has been an age. Isabu's voice rumbling below him snapped the teenage from his eyeing of the area, and his gaze snapped towards where Isabu's head was aimed. A titanic beast casually lounged on the ground, a carapace of grayish-blue armor covered most of its body, leading up to a face like that of a knight's helmet topped with a titanic beetle horn. The lower half of its body was a modeling of light green and orange, serpentine in structure leading into one massive tail that branched out 6 massive insectoid wings of the same color. Chome, the seven-tailed beast. The seven-tailed beast laughed lightly and rose up to its full massive height, rising higher above even Isabu himself. I am surprised with the abrupt meeting, both that and the fact that you trusted a human enough to bring them here. You're Jinchuriki at that. Needs must, I'm afraid. Isabu shrugged his shoulders, jostling Daiki a bit. I of course would never bring an outsider into this world unless I implicitly trusted them, and the situation were not so desperate, he stressed. Chome in response, chortled, you have changed, brother. The beetle-tailed beast was quick to notice. Before, you would have apologized first before anything else. Daiki practically felt Isabu roll his eye. My new Jinchuriki is a bad influence, you could say. He replied, but there was no hiding the smirk on his face even with his mouthguard, and the fondness in his voice. Love you too, buddy. Daiki thought, grinning. The chortle turned into full-blown laughter. How lucky for you, Chome said, to find a Jinchuriki you have come to like. Fu is the best I've had since I was first sealed, but I would not even dream of bringing her here, nor sharing my full strength with her willingly. Yeah, about that, Daiki cut in, crossing his legs as he sat atop his buddy's head and leaning his chin on his fist as he stared over at the titanic seven-tailed beast. You might not have a choice soon. And the fabled and ever so bold Daiki speaks. Komio hummed, do you know, there is hardly an hour that goes by where Fu does not think about you? His brows raised. That's good to know, but not something you should be revealing, he replied. That's private, you know. Chome shrugged. Maybe, it is however a decent source of entertainment, and being sealed as I am is ever so boring, he replied, but putting that aside, I assume you saying I might not have a choice, pertains to what my brother said about a desperate situation. There is an organization known as Akatsuki Brother, led by Madara Uchiha in the shadows. Isabu cut in bluntly. Chome snorted, Madara Uchiha is dead. No, he is not quite at least, Isabu replied. My former Jinchuriki, the Mizukage, was put under a genjutsu and controlled by the man for years before he was killed. But that is not the true problem. Controlling a mere Kage would be child's play for a monster on the same level as Hashirama Senjut. No, it is the fact, brother, that Madara Uchiha has obtained the Rinnegan. Chome gave a start and his wings flared angrily. Impossible, the titanic beast denied, voice thundering. Father's eyes could not be obtained by a mere human. Very possible actually, Daiki refuted. Madara is a direct descendant of the Sage of Six Paths through his oldest son. And Chomei scoffed. Many can claim father as an ancestor, not just the Uchiha, but the Senju and even those absurdly crazy Uzumaki freaks too. Exactly, brother, Isabu nodded, making the seven-tailed beast cock his head in confusion. Both lineage together at the highest form, together can unlock the Rinnegan. Madara Uchiha obtained the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, and in his escape during his final battle with Hashirama's Senju, bit off a chunk of the Senju's flesh. And then he integrated that flesh into himself, taking even Hashirama's wood style for himself and Senjutsu. Through cultivating the bloodlines of both of our father's true blood children, his Sharingan evolved and became the Rinnegan. Chomei stilled. This is terrible news indeed, he bit out, those eyes in the hands of the man whom started this nonsensical Jinchuriki nonsense by enslaving Ku-. Chomei paused and his head angled to look at Daiki, before he continued, Kyuubi is the thing of nightmares. Don't worry, I already know all your names, Daiki assured the beast, but the bad news doesn't end there with Madara. Chomei sighed, of course it does not, how unlucky, he rumbled, I assume it has something to do with this Akatsuki group you speak of. How it can get worse I shudder to think. It gets far worse, brother, Isabu warned. Akatsuki itself is a group made up of 10 S-class shinobi and kunoichi. Their goal is to capture us. And then seal all of us inside the Geto Mizu and resurrect the Jubi. Those fools. Chomei snarled, what madness possessed them to think of such a goal? They know not with the forces they meddle. Madara Uchiha wishes to surpass father and become the Jinchuriki of the Jubi, Isabu revealed, and cast the eternal Tsukiyomi upon the world, trapping the entire world in a genjutsu. Chomei just stared. An awkward silence permeated the warm orange telepathic world of the tailed beasts as the seven-tailed beetle digested the absurd information just dropped upon him. Finally, after a near minute, Chomei spoke again. How terribly unlucky, he huffed. So that is what you mean when you said I may not have a choice in sharing my power with Fu. Pretty much, Daiki shrugged. To be blunt, Suki is being trapped in a Jinchuriki is for you, it's also your best protection. The Akatsuki have multiple Sharingan uses and a Rinnegan user. And you guys are vulnerable to Dojutsu hypnosis. But working together with a Jinchuriki like us, we become practically immune to Genjutsu. You can see then why I agreed to work alongside Daiki here, Isabu spoke up. Becoming fond of him came later, I chose to back him out of necessity at first. And hope to convince you to do the same with your current Jinchuriki. A rather steep request, Chomei huffed, but even should I agree, Fu will need to as well. I cannot share my full power with her, with the seal blocking me. Even if I wanted to. Leave that to me, Daiki said, as it is, with full access to your power, even Kage won't be able to take Fu lightly, and Waterfall is allied with the leaf. That makes two perfect Jinchuriki working together, alongside all the powerful ninja I'll have to back us up when I'm Hokage. Ah yes, I had almost forgotten you were chosen as the next Hokage, Chomei hummed, with access to my and Isabu's full power, and the full might of the leaf, yes few could hope to challenge such a power block. That is, unless your name is Madara Uchiha. Even before he apparently obtained the Rinnegan and the wood style, that man was far beyond us, a monster in human flesh. Don't worry about Madara brother, Isabu assured him, Daiki will surpass him. Him and Hashirama alike, Daiki will ascend far above them both, in time, he may even reach the level of father. Daiki gave a start at his Biju's words, but before he could say anything, the seven-tailed beast replied, such confidence you speak with brother, such pride in your voice, Chomei laughed. How lucky you are to have obtained a Jinchuriki you have such faith in. Very well, I'll agree to your plans and back you. Thank you brother, Isabu replied, in that case, if you are willing. I'd like you to impart some of your chakra to Daiki, so he can act as a base for us to meet, and allow him and Fu to talk here more easily instead of having to rely on the technique they've been using. Barely a few seconds had passed in the real world when Daiki returned to consciousness. One of the greatest benefits of the world of the tailed beasts was that time passed much quicker in there than on the outside. Absently, as he opened his eyes, his hand trailed to the seal on his neck, where he could feel the small piece of chakra Chomei had bestowed upon him residing. Already the purified energy of the star chakra and energy of Jello were being filtered into it, just like the chakra imprints he'd absorbed what felt like an age ago now from Sasuke and Naruto. Over time, that small piece of Biju chakra would grow to terrifying proportions, and when he absorbed it, he would take the abilities of those tailed beasts for himself. And it wasn't the only one in there. beyond the chakra of Chomei, Sasuke, and Naruto. He'd also stored the chakra he'd taken from Gaara, the traces of Shikaku's chakra, and of course, the rather substantial amount of Kurama's chakra he'd absorbed when he goaded Naruto during their training. That makes 4. Daiki thought, standing up. 5 more, and he'd have complete access to the chakra that made up the Jubi. In vastly smaller amounts for sure. But all 9 together should possibly grant him the power of the 6 paths. Well, if not, you've more than one plan to reach that point anyway. Isabu pointed out drily. He wasn't wrong. There was of course his plan to use chakra of Indra and Ashura from Naruto and Sasuke's chakra to evolve Shursue's Sharingan into the Rinnegan. And since 6 paths chakra came from full total mastery of the 5 elements plus that of yin and yang, he also planned to take 5 different chakra elemental blades, one of each element, and seal them inside himself to massively enhance the potency of his elemental affinities and gain perfect balance in those affinities, allowing him to gain access to elemental combination bloodlines such as the ice style, scorch style, and more. Just like how the perfect balance of water and wind chakra or in his armor allowed for him to use ice style. At which point, he would use the Izanagi to comprehend the full usage of yin and yang. 3 paths to ultimate power. Of course, regardless if one of them was enough, he planned to go through with all 3 of them anyway. The path of the grind would accept no less. Of course not. Isabu snorted. As he stood, Fu noticed and grinned at him. "Ah, Daiki, you're back, that was quick." The tan older girl beamed. "Did you and the big bug have a good talk?" "Something like that," he smiled back. "Pretty dickish to call him a big bug though, isn't it?" "Nah," Fu waved him off. "It calls me a pathetic weak little useless human. I call it a big stupid bug. It's a game we play. There's no hard feelings or anything," he shrugged. "Oh, so it was a bit like how he rizzed up Isabu and they bickered fondly?" "Never, ever even think that again. I almost vomited, and I don't eat," Isabu gagged. "So gay." Ignored. "Fair enough," Daiki shrugged before grinning at her, "but yeah, we had a good talk. And I convinced the 7 Tails to tell you his real name and also give you full access to his power." "Oh, that's pretty cool," Fu grinned wider, before blinking. "Wait, what?" His own grin got wider. "Pretty cool for sure, babe," he winked, "but yeah, I'll sum it up. There's some terrorist group called Akatsuki, full of S-rank ninja, 10 of them at least, and they want the bijou. I just let the big guy know that they're gonna come for him too, and well, Waterfall isn't exactly that powerful, so there's little protection for you and him here." That's a bummer." Fu simply nodded, accepting his words easily, before pouting. "So the big bug agreed to let me use his full power just because of that, huh? Lame, stupid-ass bug." Fu was the only person he knew that would say such a thing in response to being granted full access to a bijou's power. "Never change, Fu," Daiki laughed. "So, what should we do for now then? I've only got a few hours to hang out before I need to head back." Fu tapped her chin. There's not a whole lot to do in Waterfall I haven't done yet," she mused. Do you want to go see that silly school Shibuki had built and made me go to? Remember, the one I told you about?" He blinked. Yeah, I remember something to that effect." He completely lied. In his defense, Fu tended to ramble a lot. "Didn't you already graduate from the Ninja Academy of Waterfall? Why is he making you go to another school anyway?" Something life skills, bleg." Fu stuck her tongue out. "I wasn't really listening. I tend to tune him out when he rambles." Daiki snorted at the irony. She grinned. "I did learn to sew though, which is pretty cool, and I've gotten way better at cooking thanks to the economics classes," she boasted, putting her hands on her hips. "You'd probably like it. Everyone had to wear uniforms, all the girls once had tiny skirts. Shibuki is a real closet perv, I tell you. Schoolgirl uniforms." Shibukai was getting more and more of a man worth admiring these days, wasn't he? "I wouldn't mind seeing you in your school uniform." Daiki shrugged. Fu crossed her arms and nodded sagely, as expected of Daiki the perv, she said, before laughing and grabbing his arm, twin chakra wings extending from her back. "Well, alright then, let's go then, I'll show you," she shouted excitedly, and without waiting for a response, zipped into the air, dragging him up like a ragdoll. They dropped in at Shibuki's place to let him know Daiki was in the place and visiting. Fu had literally landed them on the ledge of his office, kicked his door in, announced their arrival and his presence. And before Shibuki could even greet him, was zipping into the air again, dragging Daiki by the arm as he flapped uselessly in the wind. Fu, as it turned out, lived in a lovely little apartment complex. It wasn't massive or expensive or anything like that, but it was still nice, and afforded her 2 comfortable-sized bedrooms. And they even had walk-in closets apparently. Daiki found himself dragged into her bedroom, a surprisingly pink space, with a pink bedspread. It even had a big shaggy pink rug in the middle of the floor. A very girly room he had not at all expected of Fu. But maybe he should have? For all she was a total tomboy in attitude, he'd never seen her shy away from the female side of things. It was more that, she just didn't have anyone to indulge with such a thing before. I'm her first friend, he remembered. And it wasn't like she had actually made any friends still in the waterfall village, even if she was more accepted now thanks to her actions during the coup from that water armory using punk that almost killed him. Ta-da! Fu bounced out of her walk-in closet little more than 2 minutes after throwing him onto her bed, striking a pose with jazz hands. She had completely ditched her useful white top and skirt combo, for a rather skimpy school uniform. Wow, he blinked. A black pleated mini-skirt that barely made it midway down her thighs, leaving her long-toned legs, and full thighs in full view, leading down to a pair of loose socks that wouldn't have looked out of place on a gyro. While up top, she wore a plain white button-up shirt. She hadn't bothered to button up beyond a single button at the bottom, revealing a surprisingly large set of tan breasts held in a lacy green bra. She'd even replaced her red choker with a black one, and did she always have earrings in? All in all, she looked like a gyro. And Daiki had suddenly found an all-new appreciation for gyros as she beamed at him, pretty bright orange eyes glittering. He looked her up and down, before nodding and repeating, "Wow." The smile that spread across her face was blinding. "You like it then?" she asked, shamelessly twirling around, her skirt fluttering up and baring bodacious cheeks split in the middle by lacy green. "Love it, you look amazing," Daiki admitted, having a hard time pulling his eyes from her breasts, but with supreme grind-enhanced willpower, he managed it. "I didn't think you were so stacked though," he blunted said. He didn't really see a need to be polite about it when she was just showing off. "That's 'cause I use chest bindings," Fu shrugged. "They're annoying to put on, but honestly my boobs are way more annoying. I fly around a lot, yeah? Super fast too, so they bounce all over the place unless I bind them." The older girl shamelessly explained. "They are pretty big," he agreed. "I know, right? Figured you'd like 'em," Fu laughed easily, completely shameless in her reply as she hopped in place making them bounce deliciously. "So how about taking me out on a date then, Daiki?" She fired her shot suddenly. He blinked, not at all expecting that. But he was no fool. "I'd be an idiot to say no," he replied, eyes drifting over the older girl's expansive tan cleavage, before a thought occurred. "Speaking of big, I've got something I want to give you." He had no need of it himself, but he had picked up a very useful technique from observing Tsunade that would be a big help to Fu, and a few others. It was a pretty high-tier thing, mind you, and not something he'd usually give out to just anyone. But this was Fu. And besides, full access to Komiai's chakra or not, she was the only one of any note here in the waterfall village. If they were attacked by the Akatsuki, it would take him a little while to get here in time. "Oh?" Fu's eyebrows rose in interest and she skipped over, "Another gift? You remember last time you were here, you gave me an incredible summoning contract among other things, right? You'll totally spoil me, Daiki." She smirked at him as she leaned over his sitting form, large tan breasts dangling in his face. "I'll give the girl this, she is not shy and she is not afraid to go for what she wants." Isabu snorted. "Damn right," he smirked right back, and reached up, to poke her forehead, chakra alighting along his finger as he inscribed a very specific seal. When he pulled back, there was a purple diamond mark on her forehead. When he lowered his finger, Fu shuddered and reached up to tap it. "What did you just do? This is some kind of seal, right? I can feel it." "It's the strength of 100 seal," Daiki told her. "It's a seal made by Tsunade Senju. It's pretty simple, but it's a chakra battery. Channel your excess chakra into it every day and build it up. It'll come in handy in a pinch if you're ever low on chakra. And if you draw on it in full, the chakra will be used to amplify your physical abilities massively, a lot like our tailed beast cloaks, and even amplify your techniques." For a second, Fu just stared, before giggling and slumping onto the bed beside him, leaning back on her hands as she looked at him, her shirt pulling back to show even more of her green bra holding back those lovely large breasts of hers. A warm, bright smile appearing on her face. It's no wonder girls let you get away your perviness when you're so good to them. Then before he could say anything else, the tan older Jinchuriki leaned over and pressed her lips against his in a chaste kiss. "Thank you," she said, before pulling back. Daiki touched his lips, and laughed lightly. "Don't mention it," he replied, "it's just to make sure you have more strength to protect yourself. The world would be a lot less fun without you constantly chattering in my head." Heh, she thumbed her nose proudly, "and don't you forget it." "I definitely won't." Daiki shook his head ruefully and stood up, holding his hand out to her. "Now, how about we go on that date? Though, you'll have to take the lead. I barely saw anything of note the last time I was here, definitely nowhere good enough for a date." She took his hand and he helped her to her feet. "You're still paying though." She stuck her tongue out, before giving him a grin full of mischief. "And I'll be bringing my camera just in case you randomly decide to lose your clothes. You never know with you, and you still owe me a picture of your dick." "You're obsessed with my dick." Daiki couldn't help but snort and roll his eyes. "Yes, personally I don't see the appeal of that tiny little flesh rod." Isabu cut in to slam dunk his ego. "Hey, mine is huge. Way bigger than average." Daiki sputtered inwardly, defending himself as he received a critical hit. "Even if it was longer than your leg, it'd still be tiny to me," Isabu smugly retorted. "That big wanker." "No you," Isabu maturely responded. "Just collecting what I'm owed," Fu shrugged, before pumping her fist. "Now let's go make you spend a fortune on me on our date." "Sure," he rolled his eyes. He had quite a bit of money thankfully due to his clones running D-rank missions before the Chunin exams. With his grip on her hand still he pulled along with him towards the door of her bedroom, when a thought occurred. "Actually, you wouldn't happen to have a few spares of that uniform, would you? Socks included." He would love to see Tenten rocking the gyro look. "And maybe a few others." Fu raised a brow at him, before rolling her orange eyes. "You're really the worst, Daiki," she huffed, but the smirk on her face could not be hidden. "Yes, sure you can have them. But, you better make this date extra worthwhile." He opened his mouth. "And let me take a picture of your dick while I'm at it," she cut him off. Fine, he gave in. Truly, the sacrifices he made for the greater good were beyond ken. Power of the human sacrifice, my titanic-shelled three-tailed ass. Isabu scoffed. Good boy. Fu beamed. He did his level best to give Fu the best date she could ever want. He spoiled her, taking her to the most expensive restaurant in Waterfall. It ate a chunk into his savings, but that didn't matter as long as Fu was fine. And afterwards, they went to the theater where he took her to watch the latest Princess Gale movie that just came out. She was for sure surprised me. He revealed to her that Princess Gale, the actress, was in fact a real princess. And afterwards, he finished up by just shooting the breeze with her, walking hand in hand through the village and visiting the great tree overlooking the village where they did battle with Suayan. The date ended up dragging on a lot longer than he planned for, and the few hours he planned on staying turned into 7. Especially after he took the time to loosen her seal for her, to allow Chomei to share his chakra with her more freely. It would be begrudging for sure to start, but he was sure that now that Fu and Chomei were forced into more regular contact, she'd grow on the big bug bijou. Before long, however, it was time for him to leave Waterfall behind. Anko would be going spare after all. Up above the village itself, in the massive branches of the tree overlooking the entire village, they sat atop one of the branches, peering out over the land of fire. So high in the air were they, he could actually see Konoha far off in the distance. This was fun. Fu mused, leaning against him, chin on his shoulder. It was, he agreed, one arm wrapped around her waist holding her close to him, feeling the warmth of her body against him. Could have done without being forced to flash my dick in the cinema bathroom for you to take a picture though. Ha! Fu just smirked. Then she sighed. It was fun getting to see you in person again, pervy Daiki, she mused. Next time though, I don't want to wait so long to see you again. She burrowed her chin into his shoulder as she whispered. Don't worry, I'll make sure to come visit you more often. Now that I can fly, I'll be able to zip here and back to Konoha quickly whenever I want, Daiki assured her. How could I resist after seeing you like this after all? He cheekily winked and squeezed her waist. Such a perv, the mint-haired 17-year-old giggled. Says the girl obsessed with my dick, he snorted, pressing a kiss to the crown of her head. They stayed like that for a little while longer, before he had to leave. He soared off into the air, while Fu watched from the tree overlooking the waterfall village, a small smile on her face, then raised her hand. A rippling wave of chakra spread through the air, and then echoed in his mind as her message landed true. Next time, I'll give you something even better to look at. Daiki grinned. Chapter 66. Upon their return to the village, the great and amazing Daiki and Anko were bundled up into the old man's office for a debriefing. The dry look on Old Man Third's face as he explained what he got up to in general during the mission, leaving out the adventures of his clones, such as supremely amazing assassination of a nasty-ass looter, the meeting with Mei Terumi, securing the village hidden in the mist's allegiance, and of course, his shibonki with Tsunade. Well, one could be forgiven if they confused his old leather-skinned face with the sands of the Suna Desert and... Stop, Sarutobi palmed his face, giving Daiki a baleful look. Why are you narrating? Daiki opened his mouth, but the old man cut him off. No, never mind. The Hokage rolled his eyes. I'm more interested in these supposed adventures your clones got up to that you're leaving out. Especially when you didn't see fit to leave out your passionate affair with a woman, who is both my former student and is like a daughter to me. Thank you for that, by the way. Daiki flashed him a thumbs up. No can do, spoilers and all that, he grinned, before slamming his palms on the old man's desk. I'll tell you later, but more importantly, put the paperwork through, old man, and promote me to elite jonin. Get it all ready for me to pick up straight after the exams. I've got a student I want to take on. Besides that, nothing was ever sure in this world. There was a slim, tiny insignificant decimal pointed chance that the old man could possibly die during Petamara's little invasion. If he did, he'd be thrust straight into the Hokage position, from genin. That's already been done though. I told you I took care of that during our training together, remember? Hiruzen raised a brow. Daiki raised one right back. Totally. Apparently you weren't listening at all. I've been spreading your exploits through the village and the land of fire, growing your legend and making sure your name is on a lot of lips, to make your eventual ascension to Hokage all the more seamless. Hiruzen rolled his eyes as he explained, including that you were so impressive and your deeds so great, that your promotion has already been decided on. Besides, you're already teaching little Hanabi Hyuga. You don't need to be a jonin to continue doing so or put an official title on it. Oh, ha. He was wrong on one thing though, it's not for Hanabi, Daiki replied, leaning on the desk and grinning at the old man. I want to take the Kurama clan girl as a student. Hiruzen gave him a befuddled look. You want to take a girl older than you, as a student? He asked dubiously. A girl, who is the opposite of you. Quite timid, withdrawn, and not at all very physically impressive. Albeit, she has great talent for genjutsu. Something you pay the least attention to in your training. Daiki simply nodded, grin widening. Yeah, about that, he continued. Let me take a peek at the forbidden scroll, will you? I know Bringer of Darkness is in there. You said I could remember? Hiruzen sighed, reaching into his desk drawer to retrieve his pipe, and lit it with a simple puff of his lips. He took a deep puff of it, before breathing out a cloud of smoke and giving Daiki another dry look. I remember something to that degree, but the fact you bring up such a thing in relation to poor sweet Yakumo is making me very suspicious. He narrowed his eyes lightly. Why exactly do you want to teach a girl you've never met before, to my knowledge? Who has a very different specialization than you? You are aware of the Edo, correct? Daiki scoffed. Old man, I don't specialize in anything except being a badass that all the ladies love. I've just not focused as much on genjutsu, but I'll master it too. He waved him off, and of course I know about the Edo, that's why. Let me take the girl as a student. I'll turn her into a genjutsu monster that Itachi Uchiha would rather run that fight. Hiruzen steepled his hands together and leaned forward over the desk, holding eye contact with Daiki, till they were nearly touching foreheads. Itachi is a master of the Tsukiyomi, one of the most formidable techniques in existence. It is a genjutsu so potent that it can affect the body itself, the Hokage told him seriously. He can speed up your perception inside that genjutsu over 1 billion times. In a single second of being trapped inside that genjutsu, if he so desired, he could make you experience 1,000 years and it will reflect on your body. He has done such things before. Do not take Itachi Uchiha lightly. Oh great, even in this world he couldn't escape Itachi glazing. It took an awful lot of effort for Daiki not to roll his eyes. He respected the old man a lot, he really truly did. But Itachi? Powerful as he was, Daiki thought he was an utter buffoon. An absolute waste of talent. Not impressed, I'd no sell it, Daiki shrugged, or he would. So what if Itachi could make him live 1,000 years? 3,000 he supposed, considering it was 1,000 years per second according to the old man. He'd just convert a ton of chakra he'd stored into life force and laugh in Itachi's face. I'm a perfect Jinchuriki, remember? My big turtle buddy would break me out of it instantly. Besides, Sasuke already proved it was possibly to resist and break Tsukiyomi with the Sharingan to counter it in skill with Sharingan Genjutsu. And what Sharingan Genjutsu was as bullshit as Tsukiyomi? Koto Amatsukami. Once he'd made Shursui's Sharingan his, Itachi was cooked. That finger-poking buffoon that never explained fucking anything. Cryptic, useless, idiotic cunt. I suppose that's the best I'll get from you, but I'll caution again, never underestimate Itachi Uchiha, Hiruzen warned, before leaning back and sighing as he took another puff of his pipe. Very well, after the Chunin exams, you may take young Yakumo as a student as well. Perfect. Once he got her as a student, he was going to leverage his position to get Hanabi to graduate early and become an official genin under his leadership and teach her properly. In the time it took for the Shippuden point to come about, he was going to make both of them S-class kunoichi. And? Daiki challenged, raising both eyebrows and casting a glance at the large scroll residing behind him. Hiruzen rolled his eyes. Fine, considering you went above and beyond in your mission and even convinced Tsunade to come back somehow, you deserve it. But you're not leaving my office with it, the old man clicked his tongue, and you're only allowed a half an hour with it. He resisted the urge to laugh in triumph. With the enhanced mental abilities his Shinkigen gave him, memorizing it all would be a cakewalk. Do you smell that? Daiki smirked and asked aloud 45 minutes later as he leisurely hopped over the roofs of the village, making his way home. No. Isabu replied, and scoffed, you know I can hear your thought process, right? I know you're about to say something lame and think that's cool. It's the smell of victory, buddy. Daiki completely ignored his words as he replied, flipping into the air and casually somersaulting multiple times just for the heck of it. Smells exactly like the same old Konoha. Isabu rolled his eye. Exactly, and since Konoha is the strongest village, it smells of victory. Daiki laughed with impeccable logic. I'm going to sleep. Isabu replied simply, and cut their connection in complete defeat. Such was the power of Daiki's logic. He continued laughing, he was in a great mood. Putting aside everything he'd accomplished on his mission, a hot and heavy encounter with Mei, the horizontal tango with Tsunade and the awesome date with Jiraiya, he'd made even more windfall within an hour of returning home to the village. The old man thought he was limiting Daiki with only giving him a half an hour. But he couldn't know. Through Isabu he had the experience of a prodigy Kage like Yagura to draw upon, not to mention the enhanced mental abilities and analytical prowess that came with the Shinkigen. Memorizing multiple techniques from the scroll had been child's play. And oh, he had memorized them hard. He'd picked out Bringer of Darkness first, before scrolling on through the scroll, memorizing the details for not only the Edo Tensei, but the Edo Tensei release, which was what allowed Tobirama, Hashirama, Madara, and such to escape control of others when revived. And even Tobirama's mutually multiplying explosive tags. But he didn't just stop there. He brushed up on the official 8 trigram sealing style in full. He went over the details recorded about Izanagi and Izanami. Took in the knowledge of the Forbidden Reaper death seal. Proofread the details on the 8 gates themselves. And to top it all off, he greedily usurped the knowledge of the famed Flying Thunder God Jutsu. Truly, he had made out like a bandit, and the old man didn't even notice. Oh, he was most definitely aware he looked at those techniques on there for sure, but the old man definitely thought Daiki didn't have the ability to perfectly copy all that information, and there was a ton of it. Tens of thousands of words went into just one of the technique. He had simply memorized hundreds of thousands of words on how to use those forbidden techniques. He landed in his backyard a few mere seconds later, pausing as he did so to cross his arms and thought, I've got quite a lot to train through now considering all the sealing techniques I found while on the mission as well, he thought excitedly. The grind would be worshipped hard in the 2 weeks leading up to the third round, though. I still need to get the last exercise needed for lightning training, he mused. He'd need it, so he could fully master all the 5 main elements. He probably could have gotten it off of the old man if he just asked. But he needed to go pay a visit to Sasuke anyway and deal with the pedo hickey on his neck. So, he'd much rather extort Kakashi. Because he was Kakashi, and making his life harder and annoying him, made Daiki a happy boy. Speaking of extortion though. He bit his thumb and ran through a few hand seals, before slamming his palm on the ground. Summoning jutsu, he declared, and from the ground where his palm hit, a huge burst of smoke erupted. When it cleared a few seconds later, it was to reveal the huge purple scaled form of Tuka. Daiki finally decided to get off your lazy butt and work on those subpar sensory skills again, she taunted as soon as she appeared. Heh, the joke was on her, he was a censor now. Even if it was more his physical sensory abilities she was always mocking, but still. Ha, he rolled his eyes, but no, I've got a job for you. A pretty important and risky one though. Her eyes lit up at the word risky. Tell me more, she practically purred, bending down a bit so her giant head, the same size as his entire body, was level with him. The last one you sent me on was child's play. I want a challenge this time. Don't worry, this one will be way more challenging, Daiki assured her. There's an elder in our village, goes by the name Danzo, and dash. Danzo Shimura, the rival for your current Hokage Hiruzen Sarutobi. He's lusted for the Hokage position for decades, and was or rather is the head of the shadowy underground Konoha Black Ops known as Root. Tuka laughed as she spoke, showing off the Chameleon clan's vast knowledge. Even old man Sarutobi didn't know Root was still active, but they did. This has gotten interesting. Tell me more, Daiki. She was practically vibrating with eagerness. Who knew stealth missions could give an adrenaline high? Or maybe she got off on it? Damn perverted lizard. He used the cells of the first Hokage to do illegal experiments to recreate the wood-style bloodline, Daiki explained to her. I want you to find his stash of Hashirama's cells, and bring me some of it. It doesn't need to be all of it, and it would be better if it was just a small part that he wouldn't notice is gone. Even a single cell would be enough, to be honest. And between his own sealing abilities, Isabu's ability, and him now having access to the body revival technique, he could for sure safely integrate it. Consider it done. Tuka giggled, and not long later, she disappeared in a puff of smoke after they ironed out all the details. Leaving him alone. He looked up at the sky with a happy smile. If she manages it, I'll give her an even more fun mission, Daiki mused happily, nodding to himself. Now time to go take the piss out of Kakashi. Now then, where are you? Daiki hummed to himself. Turning towards the training grounds, the scarlet red of his eyes glowed and his vision zoomed in. Miles of distance rushed past his gaze, as he peered beyond the training grounds, past all 100 of the basic training grounds, the Forest of Death, and into the huge mountain range on the outskirts of the village, that led into the Konoha Animal Preserve, filled with absurd creatures that could rival ninja, from ostriches that could rival chunin, to even one odd huge rhino that could probably give a boss summon a good fight. Now that he thought about it, it was probably one of those same rhino species that Nagato had turned into one of his summons. The Rinnegan is so busted, he thought idly. The amplification summoning technique, that allowed summons to be enhanced through the connection with the Jujutsu user through the contract, allowed them to gain absurd abilities. Like, Nagato's dog summon gained wings to fly, shapeshifting, regeneration, the ability to split into multiple bodies, and even self-destruct. Something he'd need to put thought into later for sure, if his plans to obtain the Rinnegan himself panned out. There you are, he put those thoughts out of mind as his telescopic gaze finally locked on the exact location of Sasuke and Kakashi. They'd made camp atop one of the mountains that had a wide flat plain at the top, and plenty of rocky outcrops and boulders. The place was littered with craters. No doubt, from Sasuke's training in the strong fist and practicing with the Chidori. Daiki made a single hand seal, and disappeared in a blur of shunshin. Traversing the distance took little time at all with the body flicker. It would, even without it really. It wasn't long at all before he reached the base of the mountain they were training atop, and was about to walk up it when a thought occurred. Well, if Kakashi could do it. Daiki decided, nodding to himself, reaching back and forcing one arm behind his back. Even better actually, since he was wearing over 100 tons, and Kakashi never trained with weights when he did this. Truly, Kakashi is a scrub. Isabu snorted. He took a small jump, only 5 feet to get him into the air a bit, and latched onto an outcropping on the mountain. And then, with over 100 tons weighing him down, and one hand behind his back, Daiki began to climb the mountain. It was actually quite difficult, he learned rather quickly. Because of how much he was wearing, he had to have a good grip to hold himself. While his weights did not affect anything but himself thanks to the seals, they still affected him, and climbing up a completely vertical mountain with little slop, using only one hand, while carrying over 100 tons. Shit! Daiki cursed as he gripped too hard, his grip turning the ledge he grabbed onto into powder, and he slipped, sliding down, grinding his face in front of his body along the side of the mountain as he did so for a good 10 feet, before he latched onto another and stopped himself. Well, that was something. Daiki pursed his lips and noted Drilly, holding onto the ledge as he dangled mid-air. Well, it didn't hurt. His skin wasn't even scraped, he was just built different after all. Built like a scrub apparently, Kakashi got up way higher before he had to use the gates to finish. Isabu teased. Daiki, as the mature man he was becoming, did not dignify that taunt with a response, beyond clicking his tongue and swinging up to begin climbing again. Just gotta remember to watch my strength, he told himself. Control, finesse, and dexterity. He had massively sublime amounts of all of it, he could do it. This was just an all-new way of training within the path of the grind. Using his muscles in ways he hadn't before. And once he was done with this and got to the top, and saved Sasuke from the pedo hiki, he'd go down and do it with his other arm. It took quite a while for him to reach the top. But, probably way quicker than Kakashi ever did, even without being weighed down. And there was one simple, glorious reason for that. It was called a healing factor. Well, more akin to regeneration at this point. Daiki mused, as he ascended up the last 10 or so feet grab by grab. The more his muscles strained and ripped through training this way, the more they healed, and became stronger and more attuned to this training method. Finally, on the last grab at the ledge, he full-on hauled himself up with one hand and launched himself into the air, all 100 and more tons as well, and a victory cry escaped from his lips as a manly bellow, Kakashi is a scruuub. Well, hello to you too. Kakashi, who was already sitting on a boulder facing him as he landed, said, giving him a dry look. While Sasuke was sprawled against the boulder below him, soaked in a fine sheen of sweat, panting into his gaze, particularly low on chakra. Sup? Daiki greeted them casually, winding his shoulder and working out a few kinks that had formed from his climb. Sasuke rolled his eyes at him. What are you doing here? The older boy asked. Now is that any way to talk to your best buddy? Daiki grinned at him, walking over, spreading his hands behind his head. You don't call, you don't write. Not even a simple message left behind for me saying, to my sublimely godlike and all-powerful badass Lord Daiki, I am terrible sorry. But I must rectify my most incredibly weak and tedious existence, and like you seek to get good. You hurt my feelings, bro. He shook his head, tooting at him. Is that true, Sasuke? Kakashi gasped, looking down at him in disappointment from where he sat above him. I'm so disappointed in you as my student. I am going to beat you until you forget your own name. Sasuke promised him, completely ignoring Kakashi. Kinky, Daiki's grin widened, before he cast a look around the top of the mountain, taking in the many, many large craters littering the area. He whistled. Looks like you've putting in some real hard training, huh? He praised. Sasuke smirked, chest puffing out. You must really be desperate to beat Naruto in that sexy jutsu showdown. Daiki added, and Sasuke faltered immediately, glaring at him. I loathe your entire existence. Sasuke groaned in annoyance. That's basically a love confession from an Uchiha, Daiki snorted, making the other boy groan, but in all seriousness, I came to make good on that promise of mine to deal with the hiki on your neck. Oh. Sasuke perked up. Oh? Kakashi leaned forward in interest. I heard you were off on a mission with Anko. Does that mean you were successful with dealing with her own cursed seal? More than successful, Daiki shrugged, and met Sasuke's dark onyx eyes. I even learned how to break down the chakra making up the fragment of Orochimaru in the seal, and gave it to Anko, and I'll do the same for Sasuke. Seriously? Kakashi's eyebrows raised. And Sasuke grinned. How much chakra are we talking here? He asked eagerly, pushing himself up. Daiki examined Sasuke with his eyes, before nodding. About half your total amount of chakra, or thereabouts. Both of their eyes widened. That much? Kakashi gaped. That's quite the substantial amount. Sasuke already has as much chakra as an upper-tier chunin. With this he'll be well into the jonin level. Sasuke's eyes widened even further if that were possible. Jonin, huh? He tested the word, licking his upper lip, before smirking. Let's do this then. He nodded determinedly. What, you don't want to chat and catch up? Daiki teased. Sasuke scoffed. There'll be plenty of time for that after the third round. No doubt you'll bug me as you always do, he replied, before pointing at him. I plan to get as strong as possible during the rest of this month and beat you in the finals. The more chakra I have, the more I can train. So let's get a move on. Fine, Daiki waved him off, before looking at Kakashi. I'll do it and get out of your hair real quick. But I want something from Kakashi. I don't do fashion tips. Kakashi shrugged. You call that fashion? I thought you just dressed up as a scarecrow to scare away birds after you became Sasuke's sensei cause Itachi has crow summons. Daiki shot back. Sasuke's head shot up. What? He demanded. How do you know that? Actually, what else do you know about him? And was ignored. I want the master level exercise for lightning elemental training, Daiki told him. It's a fair deal, right? Dealing with the seal for it. Don't ignore me. Sasuke stomped his foot. I seem to remember giving up the tips on how train dog summons for that. Kakashi replied drily. Seriously? Sasuke huffed. You're doing this on purpose. You both think you're hilarious, don't you? Let me tell you, you're both idiots. And now I've discovered how to give a chakra boost in the process, Daiki lied. He'd known about that since he dealt with his own seal. He'll get a massive boost to his chakra and be able to actively use the seal safely to power up, so stop being a stingy cunt for once in your eternal existence as a virgin, and hand it over. Screw it, whatever. Sasuke threw his hands up and walked away. I'm not a virgin, you know. Kakashi pointed out drily. Your hand doesn't count. Daiki shrugged. Kakashi's shoulders slumped in utter defeat. Fine, you greedy foul-mouthed brat. Daiki grinned. Pleasure doing business with you. I feel amazing. Sasuke laughed uproariously not long later. Purple chakra swirled like a raging inferno around him, so palpable it was visible to the naked eye. He clenched and unclenched his fists, before pumping one high into the air with a victorious shot. Yes, this is incredible. Amazing. Unreal. I've never felt so powerful before. This is great. I am amazing. Yes. I can do this. Daiki raised a brow as he watched Sasuke celebrate his increase in strength. The flame-like markings of the cursed seal, or rather the heavenly seal as he'd changed it to, spread over his body and enhancing him safely. Ah, I remember when I had my first power high, he mused fondly, recalling the first time he called upon his tailed beast cloak. And honestly, Sasuke had a right to celebrate. As he was right now, by Daiki's estimates, he wasn't that far off from when Daiki's chakra capacity had broken into the elite Jonin tier going by his status screen. Just like Naruto, this Sasuke was on a completely different level than the Sasuke from the original timeline during the Chunin exams now thanks to this. Honestly, he was actually already stronger due to all the training and sparring they did together for months. This just jettisoned him even further ahead. With the heavenly seal boosting him, this Sasuke was probably solidly on the level of a Jonin. And he still only had 2 Tomo in his Sharingan. Lovely, he's full of energy, Kakashi sighed from beside Daiki, handing over a scroll containing his own spoils and what he needed to complete his lightning training. Thanks for that. Now I'm going to have to exhaust him all over again. I'm not gonna be able to read it all today at this rate. This always happens when you're around, kid. Skill issue. Daiki shrugged simply. Now then. He looked away from the show Sasuke was putting on, gazing back towards the village. I've got a couple more stops before I can seclude myself away to train myself silly. He had a cute spunky little apprentice to check in on, and a possible girlfriend to be to visit. Chapter 67. He decided first to go visit his spunky cute little firecracker of an apprentice. While he was planning on gifting weapons to both Hanabi and Tenten, there were some issues that he would need to get into with Tenten, and figured that would take longer. So Hanabi first did was. On the topic of gifting them weapons actually, I've had a thought, Isabu spoke up as he made his way back into the main village and towards the Hyuga compound. I think you should keep the Garian sword instead of gifting it to the weapons girl. That was an odd one. Why the Garian sword? Daiki wondered. Out of all the weapons he had stored, it was perhaps the last one he'd expect Isabu to want him to keep. Not the soaring short swords that were basically wind versions of the Kiba blades, or the Marlin harpoon, or the Manta Ray bow, but the puppet sword? I get it's still a chakra blade, and the fact its 3 blades can morph into dragons is pretty cool. But, I barely use chakra strings, Tenten would make better use of it. The most interesting part about it was the fact when it morphed into those dragons, they could grow exponentially in size depending on the user's control and how much chakra they could pump into it. Yes, but it can connect to your infinite armor and be used remotely and without hand seals, Isabu pointed out, and while connected to the infinite armor, they would have access to its ability to drain chakra. He paused. He hadn't thought of that. Granted, to be fair at this point he had like 3 or 4 different methods for draining chakra and would obtain more in the future. Alright, I'll keep it. He bowed to the Biju's wisdom, and continued on towards his destination. Good, and look at it this way, Isabu replied, it'll enhance the durability of your chakra armor even further considering you attached the infinite armor to it. Well, he was not wrong. And he supposed it would be extra cool to just stand there, arms crossed and not move a muscle, while 3 dragons burst out of his back and gobbled up his enemies. The girls would go wild. Isabu sighed. Sweat soaked her brow, threading dangerously close to her eyes, but Hanabi ignored it as she lashed out, her palms a blur as she struck at the training dummy in a blurring flurry of blows. Her body ached for rest, but she ignored it. That ache, that burn was good. As Aniki said, it was simply weakness leaving the body. And something grind. A lot of it went over her head admittedly, but if nothing else Aniki was great at motivating people. She ducked an imaginary shadow blow, spinning on her feet and sliding her foot out to kick at the bottom of the training dummy, as if kicking the foot from under her show opponent, and as she did, her fingers blurred through hand seals. Electricity sparked around her palm and she thrust it out, lightning style, Alakiter, she cried out. Her palm struck true at the torso of the dummy, an echoing clap resounding as she hit straight where the heart would be on a real person, rattling it and unleashing a wave of electricity that spread over and wide. Panting, she stepped back clicking her tongue in annoyance, it went wide again, she huffed wiping the sweat from her brow, I still haven't got it down properly yet. While it was at the point where the jutsu would still do mighty damage, it was supposed to travel forward like a shock wave of electricity, a lot like her clan's vacuum palm or her Aniki's force palm. Even after a whole 2 weeks, she'd only gotten this far. Even with help from her father when he wasn't busy. Which was surprising, both in that he'd actually agreed to help her train with a ninjutsu, and even helped with her beginning efforts into lightning element training, and actually allowed her to do so in the first place. Father had been oddly very supportive of whenever she brought up Aniki and her training with him. She had no idea why father was so receptive. But, suddenly things had changed with him, ever since Hinata, and then herself began associating with Aniki. But wait, considering Aniki's Jujutsu that was so like their own in many ways, and his sheer strength that made him next in line to be Hokage of all things. Her eyes widened, does father perhaps want to tie him to our clan? Hanabi thought. Through marriage? To Hinata? Or her cheeks burned, perhaps me, she thought, thinking of Aniki. That would make sense since Hinata already had someone she liked apparently. Aniki was so weird sometimes, but he was definitely handsome, and funny, and his muscles were incredible. She slapped her cheeks crushing those thoughts immediately, turning her attention back to the dummy and frowning, I wonder how long it took Aniki to get this jutsu down. A couple days, but I cheated. Hanabi jumped, whirling around in shock at the sound of the voice behind her. She spun on instinct, dropping into a defensive stance. She hadn't seen anyone behind her, yet her Byakugan was active. How? She found herself looking at the familiar smiling face of her Aniki, the one she had just been thinking about, casually resting on the porch watching her, his chin resting in his hand. As if he hadn't appeared in the Hyuga compound, the clan that was greatest threat detection in the entire village, without being noticed at all. Yo firecracker, miss me? Daiki lifted his other hand and casually greeted her with a wave. Aniki, her jaw dropped, you're here? She blinked slowly, allowing her activated Byakugan to fade. That I am, Daiki replied, good to see you hard at work grinding away, as expected of my apprentice. Her budding chest puffed out without conscious thought proudly, I thought you were going to be away for most of the month? You said you were going to train with the Hokage and then you had an important diplomatic mission to the Hidden Mist Village. She'd been quite proud when he told her about it when she went to see him after the conclusion of the second round of the Chunin exams. Both of him and his accomplishment, and that he'd saw fit to tell her as such. Already taken care of, and then some, he shrugged, were officially allied with the Hidden Mist. The Mizukage was quite the reasonable woman, he smirked. Hanabi resisted the urge to click her tongue, and instead rolled her eyes. Should I say as expected of Aniki, she sighed, walking over to him, but just a few days, huh? And here I am struggling after over 2 weeks, she looked down. Aniki truly was a monster. A hand settled on her head, patting her hair gently. I told you, didn't I? I cheated, he chuckled. You're doing great, Hanabi. You've already basically got it down. You've not even graduated yet, and you've basically got a C-rank lightning jutsu down and have the chakra to use it in spades. By time you'd normally graduate, you'd probably be a match for a Jonin. I wasn't anywhere near that strong when I graduated. She leaned into his touch, lips twitching into a smile as she shyly ducked her head, eyes zeroing in on the ground. His praise made her chest flutter and her cheeks burn, and gave her this odd flippy-floppy sensation in the core of her stomach. Neither father nor grandfather ever praised her so warmly and earnestly, no matter the effort she put into her training before. Aniki. Hanabi giggled quietly, enjoying the moment, before his words truly registered. She blinked and tilted her head up to look at him, even as he ruffled her hair. What do you mean, by time I'd normally graduate? His smirk widened. Caught that, did you? He said, exactly what I said, normally. Come the end of the Chunin exams, I'm going to be promoted straight to Elite Jonin. The paperwork has already been completed. I'll be having you graduate early and taking you as my student officially. Her jaw dropped. You can do that? Daiki snorted, taking his hand from her head and spreading his hands wide. Hanabi? Of course I can, he laughed. I'm him. This was what she meant by how he said weird things all the time. Him who? And why did he emphasize it so much? She did not bother questioning it. It would just lead to more questions that would confuse her. It was better just to accept Aniki's odd quirks. Besides, they were quite amusing. Won't there be calls of nepotism, she asked, worried, since I am a child of the head of the Hyuga clan, and your apprentice already? So? Daiki brushed it off with another snort, shaking his head. The Hokage's word is law. I swear people seriously forget we're a military village. There is no democracy here. Whatever the Hokage says, goes. You're not the Hokage yet though, Aniki, she pointed out. I've already confirmed all this with the old man. Daiki just shrugged. Won't it be odd though once it's official? Hanabi shook her head, amused again despite herself. Aniki was really like a force of nature. He just ran roughshod over everything in his way. You're only a year or so older than me. She did not know why she was emphasizing how small their age gap truly was, and refused to comment on how she knew exactly how far apart in age they were, or that he was one of the youngest of his graduating class, while her big sister was the oldest. There was nothing weird about her own research. Not at all. Still don't care, Aniki just shrugged her words off, before hopping to his feet. Anyway, firecracker, I didn't just pop over to check on you, I also got you a gift. Her head perked up. A gift? She asked excitedly. It was rare for her to receive gifts. How are you with a bow? Daiki asked, and flexed his hand, and was suddenly holding the oddest bow she'd ever saw. bone-white, with twin strings and looked like it was shaped like a manta ray of all things. Oh. She tried to hide the disappointment. She'd really rather something more fashionable than a weapon. Undecent, she told him. She didn't know why he got her a bow of all things though. Good, this is a pretty special bow. Daiki grinned and held it up, pinching at the pair of twin strings and drawing them back, and her pure white eyes widened as an arrow of pure chakra manifested between his fingers, and then her jaw dropped as he fired it into the air, and it rapidly expanded in size until it became an enormous arrow of blinding green chakra, well over 50 feet in length, and wider than a man was tall. He flicked the back string, and the arrow of chakra abruptly changed direction and shot towards them, only for Daiki to hold up a palm and casually absorb the chakra. This is the Ray Bow, a pretty special bow. It fires arrows of chakra. And comes with a few nifty surprises, including that little chakra amplification ability to increase their size. I added that to it myself. Actually, he thumbed his nose proudly and held it out to her. Hanabi took it from him, and he pat her head again. Wow, she uttered, truly impressed. It was an incredibly formidable weapon, she understood, just from that little demonstration. The ability to fire chakra arrows, the ability to amplify the chakra arrow's size and destructive power, and even the power to control their trajectory. Paired with the Byakugan, she could lay devastating attacks upon enemies from miles away. Right? I knew you'd be the perfect one for this weapon, Daiki boasted proudly. Once you get good with it and master Elekiter, I'll take you shopping to celebrate and you can pick out any clothes you want, all on me. Her head snapped back to him and she went wide-eyed. Eh? Daiki poked her forehead with a single finger. You're always staring at clothes on display when we go out to eat in the village, but I never see you in anything beyond training clothes, he pointed out. I figure your old fuddy-duddy of an old man is pretty strict about that kind of thing and doesn't let you spend money on stuff like that. Even Hinata always dressed pretty plainly until she started hanging with me. But I'm Daiki, the next Hokage, and what I say goes, and if you want clothes to celebrate or anything else, you can have them. For a moment, Hanabi just stared mouth agape at the completely unrepentant, arrogant, boastful older boy, because that was definitely what he was. Tears prickled at the corner of her eyes despite herself, and before she even knew what she was doing, Hanabi had her arms wrapped around him, burying her face in his chest as she sniffled, Aniki. He laughed once more, wrapping his arms around her and hugging her back. He was so strong feeling. And solid. And warm. It had been a long time since anyone had hugged her. Not since she was a small girl, before she was forced to compete against her older sister. She sniffled happily into his chest. Once he left Hanabi behind, finding Tenten, his last true stop before throwing himself back into the solo grind of destiny, was very easy. As always, thanks to the Shinkigan. Specifically, she was at her team training grounds, alongside Niji. No doubt helping him train for the next round. Wait, who's my opponent in the third round again? Daiki paused mid-roof hop after leaving the Hyuga compound. Now that he thought about it, he'd hardly paid attention to who was fighting who, beyond remember that somehow, as if fated Sasuke had ended up matched against Gaara again. Hey buddy, do you remember? He asked inwardly. Aisabu sighed. No, at the time you were griping in your head, still simmering over Rock Lee and his stupidity. It was loud enough in here without me trying to listen outside as well. Ha! Well, it didn't matter, he supposed. They could all come at him at once, and he'd be able to beat them with both arms tied behind his back. Aisabu didn't even comment or quip at all, because that was simply the truth. Either way, even without his Shinkigan, they wouldn't have been hard to find. As far as the training grounds went, the first 30 training grounds were for active genin squads, each active squad having a correlating training ground to match their squad number. While Tenten's team was mostly referred to as Team Guy, their active squad number was 12. So Team 12 had Training Ground 12. Not a bad number, of course not as good as the legendary Training Ground 69. You know what, when I become Hokage I'm declaring Training Ground 69 my personal training ground. I thought, laughing. Granted, he would have access to the very private Hokage training ground, and well, actually had full access to it right now as well, but still. He'd build a statue of himself standing atop Aisabu showing their greatness in there as well someday. No wait. His eyes lit up and he plopped his fist into his other palm. How hard do you think it would be to sculpt the Hokage monument, specifically the mountain the faces are carved into, and make a life-size replica of you? In his mind's eyes, he saw Isabu start, and open his mouth as if to clap back at him for his stupidity, only to pause, closing his mouth again, and looking up thoughtfully. Once you master the earth element, it shouldn't be too hard if you get a bunch of help from your clones. He smirked. Then that's what we're doing once we deal with all this bullshit. We'll add to the Hokage mountain, changing the base into a statue of you, and we'll sit a big version of myself on your head. Isabu snorted. You truly are the most insane person I've ever met, Daiki, he mused. Won't that basically make it look like you believe yourself to be superior to the past Hokage then? Believe? Daiki snorted back as he continued on. There's no believe about it, mate, it's just facts, he replied. I'm super fond of old man Saratobi, and he's done well keeping the village going for the entire time he's been Hokage, but he's too soft. The Yondaime was a moron and died like a fool. The less said about that buffoon Hashirama Senju the better. The best so far has been the beastly Nidaime, but he had to build on from the crap brought about by his inept meathead brother. Isabu shook his head. Going to make Konoha great again, are you? He teased. Yes. It wasn't long before he arrived at Training Ground 12. And surprise, it was littered with weapons. Kunai, shuriken, swords, axes, spears, maces and more. It's a good thing I set her up with her own storage seal like mine, he mused, and specifically the seal that went with it, to be inscribed on physical items that would return anything connected with the seal, back into the Dimension Force seal. It was kind of funny actually. He'd given one half of his seal to Sakura, and the other to Tenten. He found Tenten herself sitting on a large boulder, chin perched in the palm of her hands, looking bored as ran through the motions of his katen, spinning perfectly in place, coming to a halt in the exact same position he started in, before starting again. Not an inch of wasted movement. Come to spy on the competition, have you? Niji spoke to him without ever turning to face him as he stepped into the training ground. Tenten looked over at his words, and brown eyes lit up as she saw him approaching. Daiki-kun. What competition? Daiki scoffed, and wanted to say more, but his attention was entirely captured by Tenten as she hopped off the boulder, and for a second he was stunned. Since the end of the second round of the Chunin exams, and the last time he'd saw her, she'd changed up her outfit. For one, she'd loosened her hair buns a bit, letting some of her hair out, and styling it in a single ponytail braid. She'd replaced the pink chipao she wore before, with a white and red one that was much tighter than the last one, molding tightly to her abundant chest, a pair of red equipment pouches hanging on her hips. Her once sleeveless arms, now clad in slinky black arm sleeves coming up to her biceps highlighting her toned arms. While a pair of heavy, thick black bracelets circled her wrists, black fingerless gloves covering her hands. She'd switched out her baggy green shinobi-style pants, for a tighter pair of black ones, that showed off her thick and toned, well-trained thighs. Spoiler. God damn. Daiki resisted the urge to whistle. But only because Niji was here, and she hadn't liked playing things up in front of him and Lee. Had she put in a pair of small ruby red earrings as well? Where have you been? Tenten asked as she hurriedly walked over. I've not seen you in weeks. Sorry, I was training then had a mission. I'm a busy guy, being the next Hokage and all, he winked, making her roll her eyes, while Niji scoffed, but the Hyuga was completely ignored. He looked her up and down, taking her in blatantly. I'm digging the outfit upgrade though, what changed? Those wolves you tossed my way, she grinned at him and shrugged, crossing her arms, pushing up her chest, and he idly thought, they weren't far off of Hinata's in size. It took quite a bit of effort to get them to accept me, my clothes ended up torn to ribbons. But you managed to get them to do it? Daiki asked, head tilting to the side with interest. The adult black mane wolves were around the level of an average Chunin before he set up the summoning contract with them. With it, they would steadily grow in power, especially with the training techniques he'd made Kakashi hand over as payment. Give it a few years, and they might just reach the level of boss summons. Yep, among other things. Tenten winked and lifted her wrist, and as she did he noticed small tiny vent-like holes spread over the bracelet. Both of them in fact he confirmed, glancing at the other one. A quick flash of his eyes let him see inside, and confirm where his thoughts went. Yes, it was just like Dosa's melody arm on the inside. And Tenten had taken that melody arm after Sasuke killed that guy. Huh, had she taken it apart and fashioned it into bracelets? Interesting. He was about to reply, when Niji huffed again, crossing his arms and glaring directly at Daiki. Ten, take your boyfriend and leave already. You'll only hamper my training now with him here, the older Hyuga bit out, narrowing those pupilless white iris his way. I commend you for trying to spy upon my training to increase your odds against me using Ten as an excuse, but it is your fate to lose to me. Lose gracefully, fool. Daiki just stared. Huh? What the hell was he blabbering about? Some thanks would be nice, you know? I took time out of my own training to come help you, you know? Ten snorted, but then just shrugged. Have fun training alone, grouchy. She tossed him a wave, before wrapping her arms around Daiki's arm and dragging him with her towards the exit of the training grounds. He raised a brow. Oh wait, she smiled sheepishly, letting go of his arm, before turning to face the mass amount of weapons littering the training ground and held her hand up. She clicked her fingers, and the hundreds of weapons littering the training ground glowed, before disappearing and returning to the Dimension Force seal he'd inscribed upon that hand. There, now we can go. Ten grabbed his arm again and began dragging him again. Enjoying that seal, huh? Daiki laughed as he let her drag him out of the training ground. So much, Ten nodded, it's so useful, and saves so much time. Do you know how many hours and how much effort you've saved me from now on? I could seriously give you that lap dance you were always going on about, that's how much I love it. Well, don't let me stop you, Daiki grinned widely, feel free to drag me somewhere nice and secluded, and get them hips shaking. Maybe later, she bumped her hip against his, 'cause I seem to remember you owing me a date. Actually, you owe me one, Daiki corrected, bumping his hip back against hers, but sure, let's do it. Besides, I picked up some presents for you while I was out of the village. Ten raised a pair of brows. It's not some slutty outfit, is it? He opened his mouth, before pausing. Well. She rolled her eyes. Of course it is, you're so predictable, Daiki, it's almost cute, she laughed. It's a school uniform. Daiki protested, and I only picked that up on the way back when I saw a girl in it and thought you'd look amazing dressed the same. I actually did pick you up some other things though you'll love. Oh yeah? Ten prompted, smirking at him. Seeing as you're a big weapon nut, you've obviously heard of Kubikira Bocho, the Kiba blades and Samahata, right? He shot back. She blinked, before the older brown-haired Kunoichi shook her head. No way, she denied, her lips twitching, there's no way you've got your hands on them. Don't get a girl's hopes up, Daiki. Nothing is impossible for the great Daiki-sama, he refuted, and Ten gasped as he used her grip on her arm, to spin them around and pin the older girl against a tree they were walking past. I in fact, do have the Kiba blades, and a copy of Kubikira Bocho, he told her, taking in her cheeks that had begun to flush a dark red. Before leaning in and capture her lips with his own, she muled into his mouth, trying to reach around him, but he grasped both her arms and yanked them above her head, pinning them to the tree as he kissed her senseless. When he pulled back, they were both panting, and her lips were bruised. Admittedly, the Kiba blades are my personal weapons that I've had a while, he told her, giving her a cheeky wink, but I picked up a pair of blades called the soaring shortswords that are just like them, but use the wind element. And even the prototype of Samahata, and a bunch of other powerful weapons that are no use to me. He didn't bother saying just what he was going to do with all those weapons he had no use for. The fact he brought them up with her while they were like this, said enough. Ten stared at him, mouth agape. Daiki, you. She opened and closed her mouth, before bursting out into laughter. You're so absurd, do you know that? She giggled, an excited squeal bursting forth a second later. Before jumping, her long-toned legs lashing out like a pair of boa constrictors to wrap around his waist, and with a jerk of her hips, she dragged him into her and slammed her lips into his own with such force their teeth clacked together. He laughed into her mouth, only to be cut off as her tongue forced its way down his throat. That wraps up the story of What If Reborn in Naruto World. Thanks so much for listening. A new series will be replacing this one, so stay tuned. Just a quick reminder, the stories, What If Reborn in Naruto World and What If Transmigrated as Harry Potter, are going on hold soon, as we have almost caught up with the author. So once again, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what the next project should be on this channel. I'm currently deciding between these three fanfics. What if becoming a mangaka in One Piece world? What if Dragon Deck user in Yu-Gi-Oh? Zexal. What if Transmigrated as a Kanto gym leader? I will be setting up a poll for this, so please vote in the poll and let me know which 2 stories you'd like to see next on the channel. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well. See you in the next one.